Holy crap.
People persist in doubting the evidence.
Don't run and hide. Don't be afraid. Don't turn away any longer. The truth will set you free.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
We're turning all of our antennas towards Jimmy Church on Dark Matter Radio.
And now, your host, the captain of conspiracy, the prince of paranormal. This ain't your daddy's radio network show. This is Jimmy Church, Fade to Black.
All right, here we go. How you doing? Yeah. All right. Fade to Black. Bespoke radio for the masses. Today's Monday, November 24th. 325 days into the new year. We are live from the JP Motorsports Studios right here in downtown Burbank, California. For KJCR and the Dark Matter Radio Network, I am your so humble host, Jimmy Church. How is everybody doing tonight? Crazy night. I realize that. We'll get to all the breaking news here in just a second and what's going on in Ferguson. First off, everybody be safe. Big salute to the proud men and women in uniform all over the world, all over this country. Let's keep it safe tonight. Remember that Constitution. All right, let's just get this show cracking. We got a lot to cover tonight. Podcast. It's doing great. It's updated. Remember, we update the podcast after the last replay here on Dark Matter Radio Network. Just out of respect, that's what you do. Okay, so as soon as the last replay is done here, we then update the podcast. I get email about it all the time. Jimmy, what's up, man? Well, it's called respect. That's what this show is about. It's about integrity, respect, friends, family, and this country. Our new website is almost done. Still not as cool as faders.org, but it's looking pretty good. All right. You guys ready to get this show cracking? It's going to be a Spaceboy just tweeted, who keeps doubting the evidence? Me. That's who. You too, Spaceboy. Come on. All right. Tonight, Loyd Auerbach will be with us. What a cool name, huh? Loyd Auerbach. I like to have that name. Jimmy Church is just, Loyd Auerbach. Oh, man. All right. So Loyd will be with us at the bottom of the hour. Obviously, we have breaking news coming out of Ferguson. And I'm going to be updating throughout the show. This is a live broadcast with, breaking news going down as we speak. I am looking at one of the broadcasts right here off to my right. And there you go. All right. A Missouri grand jury has decided not to indict Ferguson officer Darren Wilson in the shooting death of Michael Brown. There you have it. That is the bottom line. And it looks like, I'll say this, when they first read the indictment and everybody was listening in, and I watched everybody's heads pop up when he said that, I immediately thought that it was going to swing out of control. It looks like cooler heads have prevailed so far. Right now, we are 45 minutes past the announcement. Of course, there's going to be a few idiots in the crowd. I can't blame the emotions that are running high, because they are. I was texting with a friend of mine who is in Ferguson right before the show. And I just said, look, be safe. This just reminds me of a similar situation here in L.A. I don't even want to talk about it. But things like this, they can get out of control. Let's just hope that they don't. There's no reason for it. Right to free speech and right to protest and speak your mind is what this country is about. But, let's not let this get out of control. All right. So with that, let's get this show cracking. And Loyd's going to be with us. Poor Loyd. Of all the nights you come on a show like this, and then we have something like this going on. So we will we'll just do the show. And this show is a conversation. So we'll talk to Loyd about whatever he'd like to talk about. And you know that. And so let's move forward. Got a lot to talk about. Today, comedian Billy Connolly, 72 years old. Drummer Pete Best is 73. And there should be a joke inserted here. It's a serious evening with the news and stuff. And I so want to crack a Pete Best joke. But we'll let that go. Our dead guy's birthday today is composer Scott Joplin. Who is Scott Joplin? Well, you know who he is. Born in 1868, died in 1917. But you remember the Sting? Robert Redford, the Sting. Well, that was basically Scott Joplin's music. There was a song in that movie, in that soundtrack called The Entertainer that was written by Marvin Hamlish. But if you go back and you actually listen to that, Marvin changed a couple of notes, called it The Entertainer, and won an Oscar. Probably a Grammy or two, too. I think it even shot to number 1, number 2, number 3. But that was all basically Scott Joplin's music that was modified by Marvin Hamlish. But Scott Joplin, master of the ragtime, our dead guy's birthday today. All right, Twitter already, man. Yeah, I was trying to think of something clever today for a Twitter question, and it's kind of weird. You feel weird when things like this are going down in real time in the United States, and I'm sitting here, I'm watching the screen, and I'm talking to you at the same time, and it's can't we all just have fun? Can't we just have fun? Isn't that what life is about? You know what I mean? It's just, and this show was supposed to be about that. Let's just go on a journey every single night and learn something and see what happens at the end. That's what it's about. And I just feel a little strange today. Feel a little weird. I waited all day. I see now on the screen a police car has been vandalized in Ferguson. And we all waited all day for this. I don't know why they did it at night. That was kind of weird, too. But, it's a weird day. It's a weird day. Let's just hope that things just stay cool. Okay? They're not going to stay cool, but, just stay cool. Not spin out of too much control. All right. Let's see. Where are we? Twitter, @JChurchRadio. That's where we are. Twitter, follow us right now, @JChurchRadio. That's what you want to do. Facebook is jimmychurchradio.com. You can go like us over there. YouTube, closing in on, I don't even know now, 7,000 subscribers, or is it 8? I don't know, but looking really good over there. But probably what's going to happen in the next couple of weeks is we're going to cross 1 million views on YouTube. It's going to happen anytime. How cool is that? 1 million? 1 million space bucks. All right, tonight, Loyd Auerbach. Tomorrow's going to be really cool, too, as well. Stephen Mailer and Brian Forrester are going to be joining us. And tomorrow's subjects, we're gonna talk about, instead of similarities, we're going to actually talk about differences between Egypt, Bolivia, and Peru. We always talk about what's the same. Tomorrow we're going to talk about what's different and unique in those 3 countries. Stephen Mailer's just the guy for that. Might even throw some UFO stuff in there too as well. And then Wednesday, Linda Moulton Howe will be joining us. And I was speaking with Linda yesterday. I don't know if she's listening right now, but speaking with her yesterday, I said, so Linda, how long do you want to hang out with us? Well, Jimmy, I said, well, look, you're normally 60 minutes. Jimmy, love the show. Let's just go for it. I'm like, really, Linda? Yeah, I think so. So it looks like we might have Linda live for a couple of hours. How cool is that? And she's the one that said it. I didn't. It was like, wow. All right, Linda, I'm down for that. Let's go. So that'll be Wednesday night. Of course, Thursday night is Fader night. We're going to have Loyd with us tonight. I will open up the phone lines later on, 323-825-5045. Rita said just before the show, do you want to take a couple of calls on Ferguson, before you kick off the show? I was like, you know what? Let's just, I don't want the show to be about that. I don't. It has to be. It's live radio. This is going on. I get that. But, the show must go on. Let's do our own thing tonight. If anything crazy starts to happen, I see Obama's now speaking. He's calling for a peaceful protest. I do have the news cranking out off to my right. Okay, so if anything nutty goes on and you're tied to this show and you're not, you don't know what's going on, I'll try to keep you updated throughout the show. Okay? All right. Let's see. Email Jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. That's what you want to do. You can also email over on the contact page. Just go over there. Just make it good. That's all you got to do. It will eventually get in here to me. Don't forget about Fade to Black hashtag F2BQ, Fade to Black questions, hashtag F2BQ over in TweetDeck will get to me directly. All right, let's see. I got some time for some quick emails from Ben Miller. Ben writes me 5 times a day, so I picked the best one. But he said this today. He says, looks like another great week for guest on Fade to Black. I think Brian Forrester could be on almost every week and have something new and intriguing to present to your audience. And then he says, Happy Turkey Week. This email came in from Mike. He says, this is from last week. He says, I hope I'm not too late to add a name to my Guitar Heroes list. But I've always liked Brian May. But that's not why I read this. Brian, obviously, yeah, he's a guitar hero. But then he said, honorable mention would go to Prince, an underrated guitarist, in my opinion. I had to read that. Prince. All right, how much time do we have? All right, I'm going to get to this last email. It's long. I'm going to try to squeeze it in. This is from Fang. And he says, thoughts on time travel. Number one, I'm going to read this fast. It's long. Number one, since you and the machine stay stationary relative to Earth, you still have momentum. You will travel with the Earth as you move through time, i.e., you stay with the Earth, since the machine never moves spatially in respect to the Earth. Think about it. Moving forward in time is actually time acceleration. Moving backwards is accelerating in the opposite direction. Since the machine accelerates in time with the Earth, the machine stays with the Earth. Similar to driving down the road. When the car accelerates with you in it, you stay with the car. In addition, gravity is not affected by time, although gravity can affect time. I believe, he says, number two, I believe in the many bubbles theory as Dr. Kaku presents it. Every decision made can spawn off a different universe bubble. Here, some different decision event was made and happened. Thus, an infinite number of these bubbles dimensions exist. So time travel may be traveling to a nearly identical bubble rather than staying in this bubble. Timelines can be thought of as bubbles. I do not think they are in phase, similar to speakers not in phase. The sound might actually cancel itself in spots. Interesting. When the phases close and the bubbles overlap, this may cause the ghost phenomenon. We see them as a ghost, and likely they see us as ghosts. So, perhaps time travel and ghosts can be part of the same phenomenon. Great email, Fang. That's what I'm talking about. Make it good. It'll make it in here to me. This is Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. Yes, we have breaking news going on all night in Ferguson. I will do my best to keep you updated. Tonight, at the bottom of the hour, Loyd Auerbach will be with us. Tomorrow, Stephen Mailer and Brian Forrester. And on Wednesday, Linda Moulton Howe will be with us. And Thursday's Fader Night. Shoot me an email to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. What you want to do right now, follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio, hashtag DMRadioNet. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. I'll be back right after this with some more breaking news.
You're listening to Jimmy Church Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Ladies and gentlemen, girls and boys, you have tuned into the latest phenomenon in late night talk radio, Fade to Black, starring the inimitable Jimmy Church, showcasing his continuing quest in pursuit of knowledge of the strange and paranormal. Sit back, open your mind, and let's get cracking.
What's up, revolutionaries? It's me, Jimmy Church. Do you have an IRS or state tax issue? Well, I did, and I called national tax experts. My problems were fixed, done, fini, and man, I got to tell you, it was a relief. National Tax Experts are a recognized tax office that services clients in all 50 states. Doesn't matter where you live. Give them a call. I'm telling you, they take the time to understand each and every client's individual financial status as well as their financial goals. And that's exactly what you need, my brother, when you're taking on the evil three-letter. So, seriously, give them a call today at 1-877-909-5444. Again, 1-877-909-5444. Or go check out their website, www.nattaxexperts.com. That's NATTAXEXPERTS.com. Tell them Jimmy sent you.
This is KJCR at JimmyChurchRadio.com.
On the Dark Matter Radio Network.
All right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black. It's going down in Ferguson, man. All right, I just got texted. There is no Fader night this Thursday. It's Thanksgiving. My bad. I wondered why I didn't have it listed. Yeah, no Fader night. It's going to be a best of. So join us. It's going to be Turkey Day. All right, looks like some tear gas now is flying in Ferguson. You know, if I'm the cops, just keep everything contained. You don't need to, tear gas. Just make sure, no public buildings are burnt to the ground. That's all you got to do. Just contain it. You don't need to. It's like, how many people does it look like that are in downtown Ferguson? 300, 400, 500? Need tear gas for that? Really? That's a little out of control. But there you go. The indictment, or no indictment. No indictment for Darren Wilson. All right. Let's see. Other news. I'll get back to Ferguson here in a second. Nick Groff posted today on his Facebook page. You know Nick from Ghost Adventures. He was the skinny guy, the camera guy. He wasn't the equipment's expert. Nick posted this 4 hours ago on Facebook. He says, "Thank you, everyone, for your support through the years. I'm writing to say that I will no longer be a part of Ghost Adventures on Travel Channel. I am honored to have helped build an amazing paranormal phenomena that has touched people's lives all around the world. I am continuing to research and investigate all things paranormal as I start their journey through the next stage of my life. Much respect and love to all of my GAC and Ghost Adventures fans. See you all soon." Nick Groff, co-founder of the Ghost Adventures crew. Wow. Didn't see that coming. I did not see that coming. He had, I was checking his Facebook page. He didn't hint anything. November 22nd, he was like, "Hey, man, what's going on, everybody?" Boom, today. I will no longer. Wonder what happened. It's kind of strange. Very successful show. Very, very successful show. Check this out. I don't know if you've heard about this, but this is about as disturbing as it gets. There's a malware program out there called Region. I'm going to throw this out to Twitter right now. You guys ever heard of Region? Have you heard of the malware program Region? REGIN, Region. It's a malware that has been lurking in computers around the world for the last 6 years, according to Symantec. Its capabilities and the level of resources behind Region indicate that it is one of the main cyber espionage tools used by the nation state. Development took months, if not years, to complete. It's all coming from Symantec. They said, Region has been discovered in at least 10 countries and was most heavily concentrated in Russia and Saudi Arabia. The United States was not listed as one of the countries infected at all by Region. The malware was installed on the computers of companies around the world, but it wasn't searching for business secrets. When a target was selected, it searched airline computers to find out where the target was traveling. It sourced hotel computers to find out the room number. And it tapped telecommunication computers to see who the target was talking to. That's right. They were trying to gain intelligence. Insane. And if you got Region, you ain't getting rid of it. But if you've got it, somebody has put it there. Think about that. That is crazy. Much more on about this, about Region, on tomorrow's show. Search it right now. Malware Region. Watch what pops up. Okay, here's the other big news of the day. You ready? Yep, confirming rumors. It's true. Katy Perry will be the halftime show for the next Super Bowl, February 1st in Glendale, Arizona. I will be watching. Katy Perry's pretty good. She's pretty good. She's pretty good. Can sing and dance at the same time. Yeah, always got points with me. She's pretty good. Researchers, but according to all of our friends, she's Illuminati. Researchers now have deciphered an ancient Egyptian handbook revealing a series of invocations and spells. Among other things, the book is called The Handbook of Ritual Power. It tells readers how to cast love spells, exorcise evil spirits, and treat black jaundice. The book, they don't really know right now, but it looks like it's about 1,300 years old and is written in Coptic. It is a complete 20-page parchment codex. The ancient book starts with a lengthy series of invocations that culminate with drawings and words of power. These are followed by a number of prescriptions, spells to cure possession by spirits, various ailments, or to bring success in love and business. For instance, to subjugate someone, the codex says all you have to do is say a magical formula over 2 nails and then drive them into his doorpost, one on the right and one on the left. That's right. You got to love it. If you have a story, anything you want the world to know, anything you want us to cover, just email us right here, www.jimmychurchradio.com. Tweet us at jchurchradio. You can find us on Facebook, jimmychurchradio.com. A lot of stories come through there. It's pretty great. Every day, when I log into Facebook, log into Twitter, there it is. I got all kinds of really cool stuff to go and read and check out and post and comment on. And it all comes from you. Really, really do appreciate it. Well, and Renee in Tucson is really good too as well. All right. Where are we? Let's take a look over at Ferguson. All I see is tear gas. Is that really what's going down? I'm watching Twitter too as well. And let's see. Call of Duty Ferguson. What? Great job, mainstream media. That's from Eugene. You're absolutely right, Eugene. I was leading up to the show. I had work to do. I did. And I couldn't pull myself away. I couldn't do it. I had to watch. And I was trying to tweet too at the same time. And I know you guys were watching that. And then I had this delay for 15 minutes in tweets because I'm listening to the prosecutor do his announcement that took forever. And it seems to me, I'm going to make, if I have one comment to make in all of this mess that Ferguson has found themselves in right now, is I don't even know if you needed a grand jury to do this. Should have just came out of the gate. If the evidence was there or wasn't there, just like anything else, just move forward. Because you don't need, it looks like the grand jury actually practically had a trial. And you didn't need, if there was something there, move forward, prosecute, go to a trial. And if you can't make it stick, if he's innocent, if he's guilty, let a jury decide. And handle it that way. But not like this. It just seems funky to me. Funky. And now look at what's going on. Unbelievable. This is Fade to Black. That's right. Tonight we have Loyd Auerbach. Tomorrow, Stephen Mailer, Brian Forrester. Wednesday, Linda Moulton Howe. I'm going to make her do the whole 2 hours. I promise. This is Fade to Black. Follow us on Twitter at JChurchRadio. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Are you afraid of the dark? Don't move. Don't touch that mouse. You are listening to Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses, on jimmychurchradio.com.
Way out here, we listen to Jimmy Church on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Dark matter.
Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter, Dark Matter.
You're listening to Fade to Black
on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
¿Qué tal, mis amigos? Yo soy Mario Carson, el tiburón, y los invito para que escuchen a mi buen amigo Jimmy Church Radio. ¡Claro que sí!
Oi, I'm Reese Evans. You're listening to Jimmy Church. This is Revolution. The revolution will not be televised. The revolution is on radio. Ciao.
right, everybody, welcome back. Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. This is Bespoke Radio for the Masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Yeah, we've got breaking news going down right now with Ferguson, but the show must go on. Shoot me an email right now to jimmy@jimmychurchradio.com. You can follow us on Twitter @jchurchradio. Follow Loyd Auerbach, too. It's @Prof Paranormal. And he is there. He's waiting in the wings. Loyd Auerbach is the director of the Office of Paranormal Investigations and author of a paranormal casebook, Ghost Hunting in the New Millennium. His 2004 releases were Ghost Hunting, How to Investigate the Paranormal, and Hauntings and Poltergeists, A Ghost Hunter's Guide. His first book, ESP Hauntings and Poltergeists, was named The Sacred Texts on Ghost by Newsweek. Psychic Dreaming deals with the current understanding of dreams in general and psychic dreams in particular. His third book, Reincarnation, Channeling, and Possession, was published by Warner Books in April 1993. Mind Over Matter focused on the limits of human beings set for themselves and on psychokinesis. Loyd has appeared on the Discovery Channel, the Travel Channel, the Learning Channel, A&E, the History Channel, Sci-Fi Channel, and Tech TV. Why were you on Tech TV, Loyd? Let's come back to that. He was a series consultant for the initial series of America's Most Haunted Places for the Travel Channel. He was frequently seen on sightings and has had other national exposure on Chris Angel Mind Freak, one of my favorite shows, Larry King Live, The Today Show, Unsolved Mysteries, Oprah, Popular Mechanics for Kids, The New Edge, The Next Step, The Joan Rivers Show, Hard Copy, Evening Magazine, The Late Show, PM Magazine, Hour Magazine, and Strange Universe. I would like to welcome to the program Mr. Loyd Auerbach.
Thank you, Jimmy.
How are you tonight, sir? It's kind of a crazy day here, crazy night in the United States.
Yeah. I haven't even checked into that. I've been kind of offline for a little bit for the last couple hours, so I haven't even really seen what's going on. Anyway, I should mention my newest book, which is called ESP Wars.
Yep.
Which came out in August.
Okay, there you go. Everything is over on your website. The links, of course, are at jimmychurchradio.com, and we'll talk about that in a bit. First off, Loyd, with this intro, is there a TV show you haven't done? My goodness.
You missed a bunch. Actually, more recent ones, so that's an old bio. I haven't done Ghost Hunters. I haven't done most of the paranormal TV shows. I have done a quick appearance on Ghost Adventures, but most of the ghost shows don't like experts to actually appear on the show.
Did you listen to my intro of the show, the news about Nick from Ghost Adventures?
No, I did not.
He's no longer on the show.
You know, there was something that came out back in February that's been recycling, and unless there's some new news, that may be one of the bogus things that's been going around.
No, he posted this on his Facebook page.
Oh, he did? Okay.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
He finally posted, yeah.
Let's see here. Well, the bottom line is he says, thank you everyone for your support over the years. I'm writing to say that I'm no longer part of the Ghost Adventures on Travel Channel. And, it's on his official Facebook page.
Wow.
And I think it was shared, by the time I got to it, which was an hour after the original posting. I think that thing went out he's got 500,000 followers on that page. Yeah. So it went out 30,000 times. And he went in and commented, thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yeah. So there you go. Yeah, I remember that when it first surfaced back in February or March.
Yeah.
And then it was squashed pretty quickly. I remember because that was the kicking off of the new season. So I immediately
except that it resurfaced about 3-4 weeks ago.
Oh, it did. Well,
yeah.
You know what? As they say, where there's smoke, right?
Right. Exactly.
All this stuff has a way of even if it's not true, it has a funny way of becoming true. It's just kind of weird.
Yeah. And actually, as I recall in that other posting, there was comments about the producers faking things and some other stuff. And frankly, there was nothing in that post that seemed to be outlandish to me based on what I know about these shows.
What did you do with Ghost Adventures before we start the evening off here? What did you do?
Well, my friend Jeff Belanger, who you may know of.
Yes.
Jeff, does the research and background on for the locations on that show. And I will say that that's probably the best researched show that's on the air. It's the only one that actually has somebody who knows what he's doing in terms of research, even though the execution's not appropriate. So they had me just do a quick interview at the USS Hornet a few years ago.
Oh, that was a good show, actually. At the Hornet?
Yeah,
that was a good show. That was a pretty good one. For some reason, and I was going to ask you this later, why do ships in general, naval ships, why is there so much activity on? It just seems like you can go. You don't even have to be hunting for ghosts or the paranormal, and you're going to go and experience something on one of those boats. Why is that?
Well, there's a lot of history that happens on those ships. A lot of things actually happen. A lot of high emotion, and there's probably something to do with the structure of the ships too, the steel nature of the ships. But not all ships are actually haunted. It just seems we hear about them a little bit more. The Navy's not shy about talking about haunted ships, which I think is really interesting, given that when I first started working on the Hornet in the late 90s, there were people on the board of directors who were very nervous about even acknowledging that the ghosts were there, given that the Navy was perfectly happy to talk about it.
Interesting.
It was very interesting. And more importantly, though, I found out through connecting by doing a radio show, in fact, someone called the radio show and who was working in the shipyard up in Bremerton, Washington, where the Hornet sat until it was moved back down to Alameda in 1995. And he, as we were talking about the Hornet on the show, he said, you guys are wrong. The Hornet's not haunted. At least it wasn't when it was up here. And I thought, at least when he was starting, that perhaps he was a skeptic, a disbeliever. But he launched into a whole thing about the Hornet not being haunted. He and his dad worked in maintenance. And then he continued by saying how many of the other ships up there are haunted. So we have an interesting circumstance with the Hornet, actually.
How many other boats have you done besides the Hornet?
I've actually only been on one other ship that's reputed to be haunted. That's the battleship North Carolina on the East Coast.
And how did that go?
I was there for an event, so I didn't have a chance to talk to any witnesses per se, and that's one of the key factors in doing an actual investigation. So it was an interesting place, and it had kind of a vibe to it. And some other folks claim that they had experienced something. But, when we did the Hornet, we talked to dozens of witnesses, and that's the key factor, is talking to witnesses, getting that testimony.
What do you make of this 24-hour ghost hunting phenomena that is going on right now on television? Why the sudden fascination, or has it always been there with the public?
The fascination's always been there with the public. Certainly enough people have believed in ghosts and life after death in all the polls. And if you go back in time to shows like Unsolved Mysteries and even some of the early shows on Discovery Channel in the 80s, until there was cable, there were only shows occasionally like, In Search Of.
Right.
And then you had cable, and you had more competition with, originally Paramount, UPN, and the WB and those others, and they started doing some shows. And it wasn't really until cable took off that we saw a proliferation of these shows, which is really more about filling time than anything else. I know if you go back 35 years before cable, I don't think any of us would have guessed that there would ever be a TV channel that spent an entire week on sharks.
Yeah, that's right.
So, you have to fill time. And what the shows did, however, because they're driven by producers and executives, they're not driven by any sort of science at all. We started using, in my field in parapsychology, did start using EMF detectors because they were readily available and much cheaper than they used to be, as well as other environmental sensors. And we were seen on TV using a few of these things, even in some of the pieces I did early on, they weren't appropriately edited. They were kind of edited for effect more than anything else.
Interesting.
And because anybody could be like the plumbers, suddenly everybody went out and started doing ghost hunting, even though they didn't follow any sort of science at all. They followed what they saw on TV, which is totally unscientific.
Well, and you also teach it. So
right.
Let's talk about that for a second. Can anybody be a ghost hunter?
Sure. Anyone can learn the methodologies and the background and the theories and models and the history of field investigation in parapsychology. I mean, it's just like anybody can learn physics, pretty much. There is an academic background to parapsychology one can get, although it's difficult to get in the academic world. You can get it, I guess you can say, in the non-credit world these days. You can certainly get it by reading a lot of the books by folks in our field, because our history goes back over 130 years in doing these investigations. Unfortunately, what we do find is that people want to take the shortcuts, and they do that by watching television shows, which is kind of, you don't go out and become a private eye by watching shows on TV, detective shows, and you don't become a cop by watching cops. So unfortunately, it's easy for people to go out and call themselves ghost hunters just because they buy a bunch of equipment and try to pretend to be like the guys on TV.
If I went through one of your classes, is it possible that maybe the ghost would not be attracted to me, or I could shy them away and I would not have any results? Or are some people just magnets for them?
I think people who are open to communication tend to have more experience if that's what you're looking for. What I have found over the years, whether it's working on my own with the folks that I work with, my students, my former students, my colleagues, and with TV shows, if one approaches this with kind of an open mind, a little bit of a sense of wonder, like you're interested and curious, as opposed to you plan on going in and yelling at the ghosts,
right,
which is what we see on TV all the time, you tend to have more luck. But one of the key elements that's left out or minimized by the TV shows is talking to the actual witnesses. And that's a key factor in any investigation of this phenomena, because when it comes right down to it, you have a spooky building that's been a spooky-looking building, but how do you know it's haunted? And you only know it's haunted by people having experiences. And if you have nobody who has an experience in its history, then you have a spooky building.
Interesting. And so what do you expand on that a little bit? Why are you suggesting that they're ignoring, is it something, a professional step that they're skipping?
Oh, totally. Most of these folks, not all of them, there are investigators who I've met, ghost hunters I've met, who kind of came, either on their own came to the conclusion or figured out pretty quickly, we're watching the show, that there was a piece missing here. So many of them, especially the thrill seekers, tend to go to these well-known places that they see on TV, and they completely ignore the step of talking to any potential witnesses. You could have a building that has been abandoned for 20 years. In fact, a number of years ago, probably about 5 or 10 years ago, I got a call from a local reporter here in the Bay Area who wanted to know if I wanted to come along on an investigation of a mansion that had been abandoned 20 years before. And I asked a few key questions. One of which was, did they have permission? Did the ghost hunting group she was going along with, did they have permission to go to that property? Which they did not. So she did not go.
Okay.
The second thing were there any reports at all? The place has been abandoned for 20 years. So for the last 20 years, there could not possibly have been reports of there being ghosts there. So what about before that? And the answer to that was, they just thought since it was abandoned and spooky looking, it must be haunted.
Interesting. Well, I would.
But that's not, most of our cases tend to be with families in their homes, and the homes could be 5 years old, they could be 50 years old. They're usually pretty well kept up. They don't look spooky at all. That's kind of, people have these experiences, and that's what we're investigating. We're not investigating a building that may be haunted. Although I guess if you call yourself a ghost hunter, that's kind of what you're doing. You're trying to hunt down some ghosts.
Sure,
that's not what we do.
Right.
We have reports, just like police have reports, and we have to investigate those reports. And without some kind of witness report firsthand, then there's nothing necessarily to investigate.
Have you ghost hunted your own home?
Well, kind of. When we moved into this house in 2006, a couple people who came over, my friends who were a bit psychic, said they felt somebody around, and one of the psychics who I trusted quite a bit said that there was somebody here from the 80s, and didn't know she was from around here or not, but she helped her move on. I couldn't tell you from that at all.
But okay, and anything?
Nothing unusual.
Okay,
our house has. Yeah, anything unusual happens, it's our cats usually.
Tell me about it. Well, I've said to all of the investigators that I've been on this show, Barry Tapp, all the cool guys that I respect. I would never. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I'm not going to check out my own home. I don't want to know the result. I don't want to know. I really don't want to know, because I have to live here.
Yeah, when people ask me, I get interviewed usually every Halloween, how do you know if your house is haunted?
Right.
And my response is, don't ask, don't tell.
That's exactly right.
Unless something unusual is happening in your house, which you have to, and if you do investigate, you find the normal explanation for those first. But unless I say something is unusual, don't worry about it.
Oh, what would you look for? And then sorry about that, because I'm going to give you an incident that happened here a couple of weeks ago, and I'm going to tell you about that, and you tell me if I need to be concerned. So what do you look for?
Well, first you got to figure out, this is where witness testimony is important. There's nothing specific to look for unless you have reports of what's actually happening. So if the reports are objects moving, I'd want to know what objects moved, where did they move, when did they move, and who was around when they did move. If it's electronic interference or something unusual with that, I want to know about that. I had a case a number of years ago where the report was a family of four in one of the rooms that felt weird and they made them dizzy and got headaches. They would see shadows out of the corners of their eyes. They smelled noxious odors that seemed to float through the house, and occasionally they'd see fireballs appearing, which would even singe things on the walls.
Mm.
And, just a number of little things like that. And when we went out to investigate, we had to go through each thing that they reported, and we actually found, sadly for them, although we got them out of their lease, there was an environmental problem with the house. It was slightly off its foundation, so the floor wasn't quite level, the windows weren't quite 90 degrees. It was directly under high-tension wires. We're giving off not only a lot of EMF, but also we're giving off, as we were able to record, a low-frequency hum, which affected them, probably is what caused them to see things out of the corner of their eyes. The house was on the other side of a hill from the Martinez landfill, so methane gas was seeping up through the ground, and there was so much static electricity in the air because of some insulation issues and the high-tension wires that the methane was occasionally catching on fire.
Wow, so the house could have blown up.
Theoretically, if it filled up with enough methane, it could have.
Yes.
Yeah. Fortunately, that wasn't likely, but we did get them out of their lease. But we have to, when people report anything, every case, even the best cases I've had, and I've had some real good cases of actual activity, we look at each of the events that people report because many of them tend to have normal explanations, mainly because the people are on edge after having had that first experience.
What about, you mentioned smells. In that case, it was, probably the methane and the landfill that they were smelling. But, and this comes from Michael K. on Twitter. We were talking about this the other night, actually, a couple of nights last week, which was sulfur. Do you find sulfur ever involved in a haunting?
Not specifically, no.
Interesting.
No, and, one thing that's important is that when we have a situation with an apparition, with someone who's probably dead and hanging around, sometimes people see them, but sometimes people feel them, and sometimes people smell them. So they might smell the perfume, cologne, or something else, like cigar smoke associated with them. It's not always a visual thing.
This comes from MC Ryder. Tall shadow things that dart around and fast and hide behind things, but that, they're small, 12 to 18 inches tall, but they're not shadow people. Do you have a lot of witnesses with that kind of activity?
Not so much, except, again, when people see things out of the corner of their eyes, which have to do with either optics or a combination of optics and acoustics that can affect the eyeball.
And this is for me, Slender Man. It may be out of your expertise, but it certainly has, or may not, but it's certainly been in the news lately.
Never had a report to me about that.
Do you think it's just an internet phenomenon?
It probably, years ago I did some research. A friend of mine had actually done quite a bit of research on sightings of the Grim Reaper. And there seems to be, in folklore around the world, people do pick up on imagery that Carl Jung would have called very Jungian, archetypal. So there may be that people are picking up on something and they perceive it in a certain way that comes from human psychology. I had a case, my first case, in fact, a couple of the folks were seeing a man in black armor, which made absolutely no sense given Northern California's history.
Right.
And especially since it was medieval armor. And that turned out to be a very Jungian archetype. In fact, the woman even said, had she just drawn it before Star Wars, we would have said that it was Darth Vader when Star Wars came out. And there's a reason why Lucas made Darth Vader look like that, had the design, Ralph McQuarrie did those designs, because it's very Jungian. The Black Knight is in our consciousness. So these things like the Grim Reaper and Slender Man and similar things around the world culturally are in the consciousness.
When you have a haunting, do you think the hauntings are because of the land itself, or is the haunting in the building? In other words,
right?
What if you move the building? Would the ghosts follow the structure if you moved it from one state to another?
Well, we do make a distinction between typically the haunting, which is typically place or object centered, and what we call apparitions or ghosts, that's somebody sticking around after death. So with hauntings, what people on TV call residual hauntings, kind of redundant for us, but the idea is that the object, the land, something in that spot has recorded information. It can be an object sometimes, but it's typically, in a house is just a big object, in fact, that you're inside the object instead of holding the object. So people seem to leave impressions behind it. It's not the dead who leave these impressions behind, it's the living, actually, who create these impressions. And the recording or impression technically could move with the house. Then again, you have places like Gettysburg where it's definitely the land.
Sure.
That's where the impression happens to be. And it just really depends on what that imprint is, what that recording seems to be. So if the recording seems to relate to the home and its history, it's probably in the building. Whereas if it relates further back, it's probably the land.
Can you expand on when you say the living are leaving the impressions? What do you mean?
Well, let's take a classic example of a haunting. Somebody moves in, and I actually have had a couple of cases like this. Somebody moves into a home, and folks who are unaware of the home's history, it might be in the middle of the afternoon. This actually happened up in Portland, Oregon. There had been a murder in a home. The folks who bought the house knew about the murder because the husband was in law enforcement, but their relatives did not know about it. So the relatives came to visit, and without fail, each of the relatives, in the middle of the afternoon, if they were sitting and relaxing on the couch or somewhere, would suddenly see a man and a woman, and the woman screaming and falling on the ground, and the man stabbing her, and then the event disappearing, the image disappearing. Problem here, the man, the killer, was in prison. He was not dead.
Interesting.
He left a recording, and one of my earliest cases involved a couple who left I guess you could say, they left a really good impression behind. It was the sounds of the two of them making love very loudly.
Okay.
They were definitely still alive. And that's what we hear. So it's our living people's emotions and our activity that leaves impressions behind. And we even have cases reported of people walking to their home. Before they flip on the lights, they see a figure walking towards them. When they kind of see the light, turn the lights on, they see the figure as themselves. And that figure then disappears.
You should see these questions coming in on Twitter. They're just bam, 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 bam. They're loving you, Loyd. I'm going to ask you a couple of these. These are actually fairly quick. What's your opinion of exploding light bulbs?
Well, if there's nothing wrong with a light bulb, which can happen, this can happen very often because of what we would call psychokinesis, mind over matter, and typically kind of falls into what I call the mini poltergeist activity. When people are stressed out, especially in our society, more often than not, it's relating to our computers, TVs, electronic equipment, our phones kind of mess up because we're under stress.
Right.
But it can, under extreme stress, certain people, it might manifest in the case of blowing a bulb. Interesting.
That's okay. And
it can also reverse. If you're in some instances, it's not making things malfunction. It could also be making things function better. I've had cases, and I've actually had witnessed a few events where a stereo in two instances and TVs in two instances turned on without being plugged in.
How would that be possible? That's the question.
Well, that is the question, and if we could harness the power of our minds to do that, we'd have solved the energy crisis.
Yeah, absolutely. So unpowered stereo fires up like it's getting electricity and it is operating, is what you're saying.
Operating, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. What about your thoughts on paranormal software, like the Spirit Box?
Well, I have asked this question of people who play with these things, and nobody has an answer for this. In parapsychology, we have been playing with what are called random number or random event generators, since the 60s. These are devices that are random in their design, and some of them work off of anything from what's called a pseudo-random process, which is a mathematical algorithm that generates a random number. And when I say random number, it's almost like you're flipping coins inside the computer. Or they can work off of something that's naturally random, like a decaying piece, a very small piece of radioactive material that's not harmful to people, like cesium. So we use those devices and have used them for testing psychokinesis, for people to affect the devices. And we have decades of research material that shows that human beings can affect these devices and make them non-random in some instances. So that's switching over to the Frank's box, Spirit box, and things like that. I'm not convinced because nobody's ever been able to show any information about whether these devices, A, are actually random, and B, how you exclude living people's PK, because we already know people can do this.
Have you tried to use the Spirit box software yourself?
I have not. And, you know, that again, when it's software, it has actually, unless it has a true pseudo-random number generator in it, unless it's truly random, there could be other things going on with that. I get people sending me photographs all the time that they're taking with their cameras, and half the time they're the ghost camera apps that add ghosts to their images.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. You just killed it for about half the audience right there. You know, when we're looking at images, and they're everywhere. I'm holding in my hand, I have an Olympus digital recorder that I use for interviews, and it's not unlike what is used in Ghost Adventures and Ghost Hunters International. You probably own one of these too. It's an Olympus.
Yeah.
What are these effective? They certainly seem to be.
For
EVPs.
EVP?
Yes.
Well, any recording device, you know, the EVP goes back to the 1940s. They didn't have digital recorders back then.
No, analog tape.
Analog tape, and there's a lot of research on EVP that's been done around the world for decades. It's not a new thing, which, you know, watching the TV shows, you'd think that they made it up for television. And what we do know from the research is that to be truly an electronic voice phenomenon, an EVP, the recording must be created inside the device or in the recording medium. If it records a sound, an actual acoustical sound, it is not electronic voice phenomena.
Explain. Explain.
Well, I mean, the very definition of electronic voice phenomena is the phenomena of the voices is created electronically. That's the definition. So if you were recording something on an actual sound that, let's say that you heard a ghostly voice and you recorded it, that would be voice phenomena, not electronic voice phenomena.
Oh, I got you. So EVP is something you can't hear, but the device is recording it.
Well, it's not only something like that. EVP has been recorded without the microphone being connected and with the microphone being basically shut down, the external mics.
And that occurs because
if it's one of two things, we think. One is that the ghost, if there is a ghost there, is purposefully affecting the device, so causing that effect on the machine, on the recording device, so that when you play it back, you hear what it wants you to hear. So it's doing psychokinesis. It's mind over matter. Even though the person's dead, it's still mind over matter. The other possibility is that it's the living person operating the recording device. It's their unconscious who is expecting so much and wanting so much to get an EVP that the operator is causing the voice.
Have you done it?
There's also a third possibility, of course, which is that the two of you working together are doing it.
Yeah, right.
Which is, you know, actually in some respects probably the more likely situation.
Have you ever done a control of that and had somebody that was great at PK record something as an EVP?
You know, we have not done this with PK operators for a couple of reasons, one of which is that PK seems to be like art with people. If you're really good at sculpting, you're probably not going to be able to paint. So we haven't found the person who can do it all at this point. Most of the PKers might be able to bend metal. They might be able to, it's rare for them to move an object, might be able to affect computers. But they're not affecting computers in a way that creates a message. We need to do some more testing. What we need to do is actually PK testing with EVP operators who do really well with EVP. kind of work it the other way.
Interesting. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We are talking with Loyd Auerbach. We're going to cover everything tonight: ghosts, psychokinesis, poltergeist, and so forth. And Loyd, I want to back up a little bit with the word poltergeist. I don't know if it was when the movie came out. It seemed like it became a social phenomenon. Was the word poltergeist used before the movie?
The word poltergeist has been used since the 16th century.
Okay, and
yeah, it was coined in Germany to as a label for a particular type of situation where there was A, not a ghost seen, heard, felt, or smelled, and B, physical objects were moving around. And typically in the early days, and even to this day in England, there seems to be raps in the walls and on tables and other furniture. So actual noise that is produced. That's why it's called noisy ghost. They did not know at that point because, the science, there was no science at that point. They did not look into what the actual cause was. They just assumed it was spirits, just like they thought so many other things in the world were spirits back then. And what we know since pretty much the early 20th century is that the majority of what we call poltergeist activity, which is, again, physical object, physical activity that everyone could see if they're present, unlike ghost sightings where only some people might see and some people might hear what's going on. So if it's physical activity and it's tied to a living agent or living person in the majority of cases that are out there.
Just like the movie The Exorcist, as soon as The Exorcist came out in 1972, everybody was possessed in the country. It seemed like...
Well, I think the best example in the movies that people would know of a poltergeist would be Carrie.
Oh, yeah. The original, of course.
Right, of course, yeah.
And then after the movie Poltergeist came out, suddenly everybody was experiencing poltergeist. And was that... is that a manifestation of the individual forcing the poltergeist, or has it always been going on and we just never really paid attention to it?
In my field, we get these reports. We've gotten these reports quite a bit over the decades when people find out about us. And I've talked to many people who have had like one-time or short-term poltergeist activity. Typically runs a week and a half to 6 weeks. That's the average. It burns itself out. It's mostly connected to people's stress, but it can also be connected to neurological issues, which is one of the things Barry Taff specializes in.
Right.
In these kinds of poltergeist cases. But it's from an individual, typically. It's from a living person. It's not a ghost or anything like that. And we can actually get it to stop relatively quickly once we've identified, we actually play detective and figure out who done it in this case.
And what do you do to stop it?
Unless it's neurological, in which case you have to take a different tact, you can work with the people to, A, accept that they're doing it, but really to try to consciously do psychokinesis. And that tends to minimize the effects. And then you do have to kind of have them work on whatever stress issues or whatever was causing the issue to begin with. And these people tend to be folks who are repressing their stress and emotions. In other circumstances, they might be the very same people who go postal or pick up a gun and shoot people. So in some respects, poltergeist activity is a much better adaptation for that. People don't get hurt in poltergeist cases. And we've even just simply getting people to do sports. Bowling is a really good release for your stress and tension. And that has actually stopped the poltergeist activity. Martial arts training or just classes helps. These are normally folks who are not physically active either.
Could it be an object in the home too as well?
Well, it can target an object. It can actually focus on a certain type of object or even a specific object, but an object itself is not capable of causing poltergeist activity.
You mean like a haunted doll, or
Well, if there's an object, the only way it can really cause it is if that doll or object is what the source of the stress is. And I have had cases where people have moved into a home that was haunted, and they were so stressed out that one of the folks' reactions unconsciously was to start throwing and moving stuff around.
Interesting. Can you tell me about that the case that you're talking about specifically?
Yeah, in this case, they moved into a home, the family moved into a home, and they started seeing a figure walking up and down the hallway and also hearing footsteps. And one of the family members was getting really freaked out about it and just couldn't handle it. And all of a sudden, then things started moving around. But the activity itself of the seeming ghost seemed to be very regular. Most of the family members were okay with it. They realized that it wasn't going to hurt anybody. This one family member was freaked out totally by the whole thing. And all the activity was happening whenever she was present. So she was generating the activity herself. It didn't happen when the others in the family saw anything, when she was out of the house. It didn't happen when she was in a different room. She had to be around and kind of triggered in all this.
Did the family have her move out? I hate to be so cavalier,
no,
but
we
I mean, what do you do?
The explanation, first of all, the explanation of the haunting, that this is not an actual entity, that this is just a recording, and we got her a little counseling because she was so sensitive to, I guess, the reactive freaking out piece of things.
Sure.
The counseling was a big help for that, but even just simply understanding what was actually going on was enough to calm her down.
Is our mind that powerful? I mean, that's
some people's minds apparently are. It certainly doesn't happen to all of us.
Okay, have you ever seen a ghost yourself?
I have heard, felt, and smelled, but never seen. But I have seen things move.
Okay, let's get to the moving things in a second. When you smelled and felt, are you saying that was because of you, or was it somebody else in the room?
There was a presence. There was definitely somebody there. I mean, this is in a couple of places. In one instance, it was a friend of mine who had passed away, and I kind of felt his presence in my car and smelled his stinky cigar smoke. And he had died a week and a half before, so I didn't exactly say that this was an absolute ghost experience until I talked to several of his friends who all had the exact same experience in their plane, because he was a pilot. So in their planes or in their cars when they were alone around that same time, they all had that same experience.
And the time that you saw an object move?
Well, there have been many times I've seen an object moved, and some poltergeist cases where people were stressed out. We've had, an ashtray fly across a table. I've seen lamps fall over, minor things, and certainly electronic effects like the TV going on their own, that kind of thing. But in some of the apparition cases, some of the ghost cases we have, sometimes ghosts can learn to move things. And at a couple different places, including a place called the Banta Inn out in Tracy, California, which was very active physically, and then a place called the Moss Beach Distillery just south of San Francisco, we've had lamps moving there. We've had glasses growing across the table and across the bar. At the Banta Inn, my first visit there actually was for a TV show called Hard Copy. And I was there being interviewed at the bar. And this is in 11 o'clock in the morning. The bartender and the owner were down at the other end of the bar. And I've been told about this ghost being very active. I talked to a bunch of witnesses already. And behind the cameraman, the rest of us, not the director and not the cameraman, but the rest of us, including the sound guy, saw an ashtray pop up off the bar, couple of feet, flip over, and then smack down on the bar without breaking. It was a glass ashtray. The camera picked up the sound because it made a big noise when it hit, and we all saw it happen, except for the two people who needed to see it, including the camera.
And were you guys talking to the spirits at that time, or did this just happen?
It just happened while I was being interviewed about the process of investigation. And that same day, we had a glass of orange juice slide across the bar, which I witnessed. That restaurant was very active, especially in the 80s and early 90s, with a number of physical things, including the change being thrown into the cash register drawer, and then you'd open the drawer a couple minutes later, or even just a moment later, and the change would all be neatly stacked in rows.
What?
And we witnessed that a number of times. We had lamps start swinging on their own. I was there with a production company doing something for a cable channel, a cable show, and as we're sitting having dinner, the salt shaker goes sliding across the table, and of course they didn't want to be interviewed on camera themselves because they were, journalists, they claimed. But we've had a number of things like that happen. One of the first nights we did an overnight at the Banta Inn was actually a lot of fun. This was a very fun-loving ghost. He used to be the bartender, owner of the place. He liked to play with people that, by all accounts, people did see him from time to time, including people who had never seen him when he was alive, who were able to identify him from essentially a series of photographs, kind of like a mug book. And that first night, the overnight that we had, after we had some physical activity happening at the bar and in the restaurant, we were there fairly late. I was there with my folks in the back restaurant area, and the psychic we had with us was up front with the bartender and the owner, and I start hearing music playing. This is 4 o'clock in the morning, and Kathy, the psychic, comes out and says, "Can you come this way?" And she points to the jukebox, and I'm listening, and it's playing "Spirits in the Material World" by the Police.
Oh, strange.
So I said, "Oh, that's really, really very funny." And she said,
right.
No, look behind the jukebox. And I looked down, reached down, and I'm holding the plug in my hand.
No.
While the thing is playing, and it continued to play the entire song, and when it stopped the song, the jukebox went dead.
No.
Yeah.
Videotape running? Did you?
No, we weren't videotaping at that point.
Oh, man. What do you think is happening when all of this is going on? Are they telling you that they are there, or are they telling you to, leave them alone?
Well, in this case, I think he liked to play with people, and we were playing. So this was definitely playful. The Moss Beach Distillery, I've been working there investigating since 1991. I've had a lot of personal experiences there, as well as worked with a number of different psychics over the years and talked to so many witnesses. And she's there kind of to have fun. Ghosts just want to have fun sometimes. The USS Hornet, which has got witnesses having seen sailors and officers, and from best descriptions we got over the years, there's probably several dozen sailors and officers there. And they're there, and this is the message we've gotten all along through witnesses, through psychics. They're there to make sure the ship stays open as a historical landmark and keeps running for the public.
This question just came in. This is from Lisa. She says, what about if I hear voices out loud and get them on tape, but others in the room don't hear them? What am I hearing?
That may still be considered electronic voice phenomena, especially if no other recorders running at the same time picked up the voices. What happens sometimes is that people can be psychic, and she may have actually heard the sounds, heard the voices psychically, even though it sounded like they were outside her head. It was still a psychic kind of thing, and at the same time that if there was a spirit there, was putting the information onto the recorder.
This comes in from Jonas. Thank you for that, Loyd. This comes in from Jonas. Says, what would make a past event replay itself as opposed to a spirit interacting with humans?
What's the difference between tape and live action?
Basically.
It's the same thing. We think that there is environmental conditions that allow certain things to be recorded and to play back. The playback is actually dependent on us, by the way. We are the playback machines. So we walk into a place that has got a recording in it, and some of us are sensitive to those bits of recording, and they play back in our heads. They're kind of hallucinations with a historical source that's there. But in terms of interactivity, why someone's around as a ghost, that is often dependent on the individual themselves. Although there's probably an environmental component there, we think, as well.
A friend of mine called in during Halloween week here. You were busy, as you remember. And he called in. His name's Steve. And he said that him and his buddy were going out. They had a big piece of property. He's got hundreds of acres. And they go out. They're going to go hunting. And they have, those things up high that you hide in. What are they called? It doesn't matter. But he was going to be in one, and his buddy was going to be in another. His buddy looks down on the property, and this is in the morning, like 6 o'clock in the morning. And down next to one of the fences were a bunch of children, like 3 or 4 kids that were playing. But the kids were like black and white, okay? Like gray. And my friend Steve, on the property was the house of a plantation-type house, mansion, that was, I don't think anybody lived in it. But anyway, his buddy came running back and says, hey, there's kids playing down by this fence. Well, they all knew at that time of the morning there wasn't going to be anybody out there on his property, certainly. What do you think he saw? Do you think he saw kids from the family that lived on the property 100 years ago? Why would kids be out there playing black and white, a past event replaying itself?
Well, why certain events play back, for the most part, most events play back tend to be high emotion, which would be positive or negative. But one of the most reported haunting type phenomena is people hearing sounds of pots and pans and cooking in the kitchen, which is kind of neutral when it comes down to it, except that the kitchen is kind of the heart of the house. So we're not 100% sure exactly why some things get recorded versus others, especially when they're fairly neutral, like kids playing. But there may be something in the property itself that had captured that bit of history. As far as playing it back in black and white, that may be part of, I guess you could say it's part of the apparatus that's the playback. When you get a TV signal coming into your television, whether it's via cable or antenna, if there's a problem with the picture, and the sound, it's likely the TV set, not the signal. Now, it could be the signal, but it's most likely the receiver.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why some people hear ghosts as opposed to see them. They're getting the full signal. It's just that for whatever reason, some of us don't have the ability to perceive visually the psychic stuff. And it may just be that in his case, that's how it came through his process.
This comes in from Bob. He says, have you heard of the theory of voices of workmen being imprinted on wet plaster walls?
Not specifically. There is what's called the stone tape theory, which is a model the Brits have, which suggests that for the most part, hauntings, these buildings that are haunted, have ferrous material in them, in other words, iron particles, which creates kind of a magnetic field that traps the information. But I've never heard anything about plaster.
What if I hear my daughter in another room conversing while walking her up the stairs?
That's probably a recording.
Interesting. Do you think, and I'm in agreement with you, and I've said this on the show so much, everything is recorded. Let's talk about a time machine. If you went backwards in time, I think that would be easier to do and to witness past events because they've already happened, right, and they're just in the ether. I think the future, physicists will tell you the future is easy. No, it hasn't happened yet. I think that's more difficult. Going back in time, everything is there. It's been recorded and it's there. It's just in the ether. It's electronic and it's out there. Is that what is that?
We're kind of talking about that.
Yeah.
There's an ability that people talk about in the psychic world called psychometry, where someone holds an object. This is what police psychics often do. They are given an object like a scarf of a victim, and they read, they pick up information about the owner and what happened to the owner, the history of the object. So it's as if every object holds information. Some people are more sensitive and can sift through that than other people. And that's kind of what you're doing if you're in a building, or, a building's just a big object. So sometimes we can actually be those psychometrists. We sometimes pick up on these things.
That's interesting. That is very interesting. What about maybe a parallel timeline? Are some of what we're seeing interdimensional beings that maybe are coming over to our side briefly and then going back to their world?
No idea. There'd be no way to prove that. Somebody even said, how do we know that the ghost people are seeing aren't aliens pretending to be ghosts? And we wouldn't know that either, except that, if you can get somebody to have a conversation with the ghost, if you can get descriptions of the person, like the bartender owner at the Banta Inn, and the ghost is having a communication, and the communication indicates the person knows that how they died and that they're dead, and they can interact. It's, in those cases, certainly not from parallel worlds, but there are some sightings which we just don't have any sort of information to know what the source of it is.
Have you been to Bobby Mackey's?
I have not. I know a bit about Bobby Mackey's. One of my colleagues was there a number of years ago. You
have a friend. He just played there the other night, not last night, the night before. He's played there a bunch of times. He said he's never not had something happen. It's just a strange place. Now, the hole to hell in the basement, the gates of whatever that is. He hasn't witnessed anything there, but but he said something is always going down at that place, and that it is definitely haunted. And on that note, what's the most haunted place that you think? I mean, what is the one place where you are scared?
I'm not afraid of any paranormal phenomena. So in terms of what the most haunted place is, I'd say right now, kind of per capita, would probably be the Hornet, the USS Hornet, because there's so many spirits given the space. But I have yet, and I've talked to all my colleagues, we're not afraid of ghosts or the phenomena itself. I'm more afraid of living people. So there are many places that I have avoided because of the living people, not because of the dead.
So hospitals, asylums, prisons, you'd spend the night in any one of them in the dark.
Prisons have, this is the thing, that emotion gets recorded into places. When people go house hunting, they often talk about walking into a place and getting a good vibe or a bad vibe. And we all do that when we go to a new house that we've never been to before, even our friends' homes or acquaintances. We get a feel. And prisons, I've been to a few prisons and that are abandoned, that are empty, like Alcatraz, and I even went to one in Australia. They feel bad. So I'm not, and they're cold. So I'm not in a real hurry because I'm not a big camper.
Right.
I'm not in a hurry to stay overnight, not because of the phenomena, because they're really depressing. And if there really were if there are witnesses to actual activity other than the emotion, that's a different story. That's worth investigating. But one of my buddies, Dave Manganelli, who's an investigator in Pennsylvania, had investigated a couple different prisons, one in West Virginia, the Moundsville State Prison, and also Eastern State. Before Eastern State, he actually opened up as a haunted place. And he couldn't find any witnesses for Eastern State. Doesn't mean it's not haunted, it's just that he couldn't find any witnesses. So the investigation part of this is a little difficult if you have nobody to report something.
So when you have all of these ghost groups, they're all over the country now. Every city's got their own little paranormal investigation
Or many
group.
of them, yeah.
Yeah, or many of them. What do you think they're finding when they go? If are they manifesting this stuff themselves? That's
I do think a lot of them are manifesting some of this themselves, yeah. But it depends on the location, of course.
Right.
Really.
And I'm bewildered by it. And this is interesting information that you're giving to me right now. That's part of this show. Let's just learn together. Right now, I'm learning, and I'm a little speechless as we move along here. What about graveyards, Loyd?
Probably the least haunted places around, in many respects. If you were dead, would you hang around at a cemetery?
Well, if I was going to rent a house, I wouldn't rent a house next to a cemetery. I can tell you that.
You know what? We are sitting on top of cemeteries everywhere. The city of Paris is on top of a cemetery, the catacombs.
Right.
The city of Rome is on top of catacombs. So and there are plenty of dead people who have died in the subway tunnels and sewers of New York. So we're kind of on top of cemeteries almost anywhere we go on this planet. If you want to go back a couple of thousand years, the issue of living next to a cemetery is not so much about who's buried there. It's the emotion of the mourners that we typically feel. We can feel that. Cemeteries are not a happy place for most people. And yet, some of them feel really interesting and feel different to people. And I've been to more than my share of cemeteries over the years just to kind of visit and look at the monuments and history historically, and talk to many psychics who have been to places like that. And that's not where the spirits are. The spirits are where they lived, if they're going to stick around at all. But there's the occasional cemetery that people are fixated on before they die. There may be the ghost of a caretaker. It could be somebody who actually died outside the cemetery or actually died in the cemetery for whatever reason, who might have decided to stay there or thinks that they're stuck there in that sense.
What about babies and kids? Why do they see ghosts?
Well, kids are more psychic than adults because they haven't been taught not to be yet. It's really, we're kind of educated out of being psychic, and especially in this world, in the West.
So
we grew up in an environment where we're told at school, if you say you saw something or can read somebody's mind or pick something information up about the future, all of a sudden your teachers, your parents, your friends are making fun of you. it's not appropriate, so you kind of squelch it.
Okay, so as an adult, if we're manifesting a lot of this with our own issues, whatever they may be, that's one thing. But if a child and a baby doesn't have an issue, and they come to you and say at the age of 2 or 3 that I'm talking to somebody in my room, what are they saying, and do you need to listen?
You do need to listen. Kids, just remember that kids do have an imagination. So they might actually be talking to an imaginary friend, but they actually may be talking to somebody. And there are many instances, we have many cases where the kids will start talking about, I'm seeing a man and it's Grandpa. And Grandpa died before the kid was born. And Grandpa and the kid never saw a picture of Grandpa. And so showing the child various pictures, or just going through a photo book of the family and having the child say, that's Grandpa, that's who I see, that's pretty impressive.
Have you had an example of that directly? I mean, it almost sounds like the reincarnation case of Leininger a little bit.
Well, the reincarnation is different, and the University of Virginia, my colleague Jim Tucker is the main guy in the U.S., although there's another investigator in the Southeast by the name of Jim Matlock who's been doing reincarnation cases for quite some time. But Jim Tucker's kind of inherited the mantle of Dr. Ian Stevenson, who really started all this rolling back in the 50s. And he works with children 2 to 6 years old who spontaneously recall past lives. And there's a difference here, because a 3-year-old who says, I see somebody, I'm talking to somebody, or is talking to somebody, versus a child who says, I was somebody. So in the Leininger case, the kid had memories or started talking about being someone, being a pilot, and dying in warfare, in an air battle. Whereas if he had said, I'm seeing a guy who's telling me about dying in warfare, that'd be a different story.
Is reincarnation, I tend to, I'm more on one side of the fence than I am on the other. I believe that, it occurs. It's real. But I have not had any memories of a past life myself.
Yeah, I have never either. We're not sure, if it is reincarnation or some other incredible phenomenon, which we haven't been able to get a handle on yet. But it does seem to be that in these specific instances, there's some really interesting things going on. And they seem to be, sometimes it's rare, but you sometimes get these cases where the kid can talk about enough factual material that there is no way possible that he or anyone else in the family, or she or anyone else in the family, could possibly have known. And it's enough information to verify that this person actually lived, that this person lived quite a distance away, that this person did not have a remarkable life. They weren't Napoleon or something like that. And there's something special going on there. And if you don't want to believe in reincarnation, that's fine. But I tend to lean towards the reincarnation piece myself. I find it almost a crime against science that so many academics would look at this and say that the kid's making it up.
Well, in the case of James, which I studied that case as far as I could take it with all the information, an exceptional case. And he, he's 3 years old, and he's naming other pilots on the ship.
Right.
And called himself James 3, if you remember.
Mm-hmm.
And
which is James, because there was his father, and then there's someone else before.
That's right. And talked about the battle and talked about how he got shot down and how very, very, very specific things. He could name planes. You remember they went to a museum and exactly. And at that age, no. So where does this information come from? Unless if it's not reincarnation, then certainly it's another paranormal type of phenomenon. Maybe it was the ghost of James talking.
The kid is somehow tapped into a kind of a world of information that we can't see or connect with.
That's what I mean. Yes, that's exactly what I'm referring to, which in of itself is pretty cool, too.
Yeah. The most frustrating thing for folks in my field is how much bigotry and prejudice there is, and on an emotional level, from people in the academic world here in the United States, where people will... one of my colleagues, Daryl Bem from Cornell, was publishing a paper in a mainstream psychology journal about some precognition experiments he did. And when it was announced that the paper was in a forthcoming issue, the hue and cry against Bem, against the journal for daring to even do this, was insane. And some of the quotes from some really well-respected scientists, frankly, were not much different than, the quotes you might have gotten from right-wing fundamentalists.
What happens to our soul then when we die?
That's a big question. We tend to, there's mounting, and there's been mounting of evidence that some part of us or something about us survives the death of the body in various ways. I'm president of the Forever Family Foundation, which is a foundation that supports research, scientific research into life after death in a variety of ways, especially in work with mediums, and especially scientific research with mediums. So we've got, some interesting stuff from mediums who are at best hearsay evidence about what's going on the other side, so to speak. We may not know until we get there. But it's pretty consistent around the world, which is really interesting. When people talk about the afterlife who are mediums, in whatever culture they come from, it's fairly consistent. And it seems to be pretty pleasant. Kind of boring, it sounds like, actually.
Not really. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network, bespoke radio for the masses. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. We're talking with Loyd Auerbach. Loyd, let's discuss channeling for a second, since we're on reincarnation. I've had a couple of channelers on this show, more than a couple. Daryl Anka being one. Do you know Daryl?
No, I do not.
Okay, he channels Bashar. Pretty fascinating. I have watched many of his videos. Fascinating stuff. He's channeling an ET, an extraterrestrial named Bashar, that is parked in a spaceship above planet Earth, and he's been there for 15,000 years or whatever. And that's what's going on. Now, then you have the other channelers that are channeling the other side. What's the best example for you with the channeling that you've experienced, and who is really good at it, and are you convinced?
Well, first, channeling is an overarching term that covers people pulling through information from any number of sources, including their unconscious. The gods, the aliens, dolphins, ancient Atlanteans, it's a wide term. Mediumship is a special case of channeling where the people that they are connecting with are verifiable, typically, which is something we work with quite a bit. And so we have a history in parapsychology of a lot of phony mediums, but we actually have, in the last 15 years, some better and better scientific evidence and scientific work with spirit mediums who are connecting with people based on only a first name, with the sitter, the person whose family member that is, not even being present or listening in on the reading. The best work right now is being done by Windbridge Institute, Dr. Julie Beischel, which is in Tucson, Arizona. And in those cases, they've got research mediums they work with. They tested for over a year to find the best mediums who could get factual, verifiable evidence or information about deceased relatives of potential sitters without knowing, A, who the sitter is, and B, anything more than a first name on that person. And you get factual information, not just the facts about the person's life. You get kind of common mannerisms. The person will describe mannerisms. They'll describe what the person might have looked like in some instances. They'll describe, things that the people who commonly want to say, personality variables, things like that. So it's more than just facts that comes through. And we can then tie that to the actual people and grade whether or not these were actually accurate statements. When you look at the channelers, like the alien channeler, we can't, we have no idea, and there's no way to even verify any of it, that this alien even exists. Ever existed.
Do you approach, let's stay with the mediums for a second, then we'll get back to the alien channelers. I'm fascinated with it. With the mediums, do you approach each medium as a skeptic? Is that how you have to deal with it?
You kind of have to when you're working with them, unless they've been vetted in some way, like the folks at, if you go to windbridge.org, you'll see a list of the research mediums who've been vetted very carefully. The Forever Family Foundation also has a kind of a certification program that kind of, it's not as rigorous, certainly, as what Windbridge does, but there's a vetting process involved. So we do have to kind of see how they work and see how they operate. And then there's There are also issues of personality and whether we can work with them. That's another issue too. So that's kind of separate. So we do check that out, and we do look for evidential information,
such as
talking about a deceased relative of someone in a way that can be factually verified, either with the family members of that person who has died or other sources of information. So you actually want statements of fact about that person, statements, and you also want the personality descriptions. We have mediums who say, okay, I think it's your uncle, and he's much larger than life. I'll give you an example. A medium that I work with from Ireland by the name of Sandra O'Hara comes over here every so often, and one of the first times that I worked with her, I was in a sitting, she picked up on a friend of mine who, it wouldn't have been hard to find that if she had read my material, she would have seen that I was connected to this guy, if she had done that. But she actually started describing mannerisms which would have been a little bit harder pressed to come up with, and even specific statements he had made to me. Like, Loyd, let me just he wants to remind you about X. And this was an actual, one-on-one conversation we had that wasn't recorded anywhere.
Interesting.
So those kinds of things are very evidential for us.
That was kind of my next question. So leaving, her name is Sarah, right? Leaving her aside. Sandra, I'm sorry. Have you sat down with another medium and actually, took them to task yourself and found out, or freaked out, I should say?
Well, I've sat with several mediums over the years and various psychics and found some really good ones and some that are not.
No, I mean that have told stuff, revealed stuff about you or your relatives that only you know, not a third party, but who was sitting down where there was evidence and fact checking. The fact checking was done with you.
Yeah, I have, and some of it's pretty interesting, just kind of spontaneous. I sat with I had a meeting with a medium from Canada who I am distantly related to, and I didn't even know. She didn't even know I was in the field because the last time she had seen me before this was when I was a kid.
Right.
And she had only been a medium for a few years. When she talked to my dad, he was surprised to hear that she was. She actually worked in the arts in Canada, and I met with her. This is back when I was working at a research organization in New York. So I arranged to meet with her at a hotel in New York City. So back when I was living outside of New York. And right before I left my folks' house, one of my brother's friends called. And I chatted with him and told him my brother wasn't home. And when I got in and sat down with Andy, I asked her flat out, how would I know that, a good medium? How do I know a good psychic? She said, well, at least some of what comes through should be names, dates, and places. Then she looks at me funny. She says, did you speak to somebody named Adam on the phone right before you left? A friend of your brother's.
What?
And there was only one other way that she could have known, and that would have been if my phone was tapped. And somehow I didn't think the Canadian Secret Service had somehow tapped our phone.
And how does that make you feel? I've never had anything quite that dramatic happen to me.
It felt pretty cool, because this is what I got into the field for. I want to see examples of this. I want to meet people who can do these sorts of things. I did not get into this because I did watch a lot of horror films, but I really also watched a lot of science fiction and read comic books as a kid, and still do. And frankly, it seemed like, to me as growing up, that it wasn't a problem for people to have these abilities. It didn't seem to be outside the realm of possibility. And for people to have these experiences and these abilities, millions of people have psychic experiences every year. And for us to ignore them is ignoring a huge piece of human experience and human behavior that, is unscientific to ignore. So it's a mystery to be solved, and that's partly why I'm in there. But it also suggests that we are more than we're told we are. We have potential, and we should try to meet that potential, or at least explore it.
Okay, I'm going to tell you about the experience that happened a couple of weeks ago here in the house, or over at the house, which is this. My wife, I was downstairs. My wife is upstairs in the bedroom, and we have 3 dogs, 3 small dogs, 2 schnauzers, and a mutt that we don't know what she is, but she's the cutest. Okay, so 3 small dogs. And all 3 dogs looked, we have an ensuite in the master bedroom. All three dogs looked to the bathroom and were staring at the bathroom. My wife notices the three dogs looking in the bathroom. And then right at that moment, the toilet seat lid fell down. Now, she didn't see it. She could only hear it. But bam! And that obviously doesn't happen by itself. What happened? And do I need to be concerned?
I think you only need to be concerned if it keeps happening. This is those one-time experiences people sometimes have. That does sound like somebody maybe coming by. Maybe it was a ghost who thought he had to use the toilet.
Could be.
But, we have people having one-time experiences. They see a ghost once and they suddenly are, and it's a legitimate question. Is this something I have to be concerned about? And the answer to that is if it keeps happening.
So you think it was a spirit drive-by?
It could have been a spirit drive, a walk-by, yeah. It's hard to know exactly what it was because from that, we don't unfortunately have specific labels we can put on for sure, unless there's other things going on. So if she had seen someone, then I probably would have said, yeah, that's probably what it was. But tough, even if she had heard that or got a sense of presence. But when you can't ask the dogs what they were experiencing, that's the problem. We only have to take those two elements, put them together, and say, well, the most likely scenario of these scenarios is that there was somebody coming by.
Okay, can I have some fun with you? Let's just have some fun for a few minutes.
Oh, sure.
Okay, Uri Geller.
What about Uri? I know Uri.
Okay.
What do you want to know?
We've been fascinated with him since we were kids, and I don't know who's older, you or I, but you understand the reference certainly. Is it real?
Well, I'll tell you a couple things about Uri. Uri is an entertainer first and foremost. That's what he's been. Is what he is again. And anyone who has psychic powers or psychic abilities does not have them 100% of the time. So let's say that you're able to bend keys and spoons psychokinetically, but you can only do it about 70% of the time. And you're doing a big show, and you go on stage and your abilities don't work. Do you tell your audience of 1,000 people, I'm sorry, I'm not psychokinetic right now? Or do you present a show anyway?
I say I'm not psychokinetic right now. Sorry.
Yeah, that's not going to work very well.
It doesn't. You're giving away a lot of tickets.
You're giving away, that's right. Yeah. So there is an element of showmanship in a lot of what he does, but I know of examples from really good witnesses that he definitely can do it psychokinetically from time to time. I also know that Uri's best superpower is motivating other people to be psychokinetic.
Oh, what is he? Has he done anything in front of you? You said you know him.
He has done a couple things for me, yeah. And I am relatively convinced that, as someone who is also a magician and mentalist myself, relatively convinced that he did it psychokinetically. He also, in some respects, he did something else. He didn't make his millions of dollars as a spoon bender or as an entertainer. He was consulted by oil companies and mineral companies to find minerals and oils by doing map dowsing, kind of doing remote viewing.
Mm-hmm.
And his initial success was so good that initially they were giving him a cut, some like royalties, that very quickly the royalties turned into flat fees because they were paying him too much money.
I've seen his house. It's pretty impressive.
It is impressive. And, Uri told me years ago when we did a TV show together for Japanese TV that it was very funny. He said, even if this was dumb luck, $30 million.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
That's what he said. He said, not only that, he said, they found oil and they found minerals. So if it was dumb luck, I'm a damn lucky person.
Well, there you go. I guess it doesn't matter.
Right.
But with the spoon bending and the watches and the stopped watches and the mechanical stuff,
yeah,
you're saying he's doing something?
Sometimes he definitely does, yeah.
Wow. Okay. Chris
one of my buddies who is an incredible magician, very knowledgeable. He's a mentalist also. He's well known in the field. I can't even name. He didn't want me to mention his name on a situation like this, but he was over in the UK, and he got introduced to Uri, and he brought with him a spoon from home, a fairly thick spoon from home. And he put it in his own palm, and he said, and Uri actually asked, Uri said to him, do you want to see me bend something? And so he actually pulled out his own spoon, because he didn't want Uri to provide a spoon. He wanted to have something ready,
Right.
just in case.
Right.
He said Uri stroked the spoon in his open palm, in my friend's open palm, and the spoon started bending. There is no chemical. There is no way to do that.
Right. I would like to see Uri bend a titanium bar, something 2 inches thick. Do you think he could do that?
Technically, he should be able to. The question is whether he believed he could do it. Because one of the things we know about psychokinesis is there is kind of a boggle threshold. If you're in a normal or close or just mild altered state of consciousness, you're only going to be able to do what your mind will let you do, and without being boggled, without having a freak out.
Chris Angel.
Yes, he's all magician.
All magician. All trickery.
And skeptic. Yep.
And skeptic.
Yep.
Now, you've been there. You've seen him in person. How the heck does he pull it off? I mean, seriously, some of that stuff's pretty good. I mean, going through glass.
I can't tell you even what I suspect. I don't know. I certainly don't know all those illusions. I know some of them, and I really couldn't tell you because people would be out for my blood, like they were for that masked magician so many years ago.
Yeah, right. But how does he go through the glass? How does that happen?
You can learn that. You just have to spend a lot of time in magic and find the right effect.
When you were on the set you were on the set for Mind Freak?
Well, they did an interview with me about precognition, and this was in the first season. So I'm in the first season DVDs in a couple of places, and I spent just a short time talking to Chris at the time. So I wasn't on any sort of set, and not when he was doing the magic outside in the street or anything.
Yeah, man, I so want to go there.
He had some great consultants on that show.
He is really good. I went through a Chris Angel Mind Freak addiction for about a year. I could not watch that show enough. He's really good. He is really, really good. Some of it, yeah. I in my own mind, I can't resolve it. And Chris is good. What about David Blaine? This is where I'm wondering if there is some ESP involved when they're doing, some of the card tricks, including Chris Angel. You don't think
I want you to know that anytime something is videotaped for a show, two things you should know. Number one, that if they didn't have the TV crew behind them and they weren't recognized, you would not be able to walk up to those people and do a card trick. Almost every magician who's ever done street magic, until David Blaine started doing his shows, if you walked up to somebody on the street and said, "Want to see a card trick?" you'd probably get punched in the nose about half the time.
Yeah, I've often wondered about that. And,
so that's piece of it. Second thing is we're not seeing a lot of stuff that's going on the shows. That's all I can say about it.
Oh, man. You're supposed to say ESP's involved.
Well, ESP could be involved. I will tell you that I've talked to magicians, and certainly the mentalists I know, my colleagues who are mentalists, every once in a while we'll get a flash of something. And if you're in the middle of a show and something pops in your head, you say it, because worst comes to worst, you're wrong. Big deal. It's ESP. It's not always 100%. But, man, if you're right, it's amazing.
Well, when the best examples of that and what you're referring to is when something is written down on a card. And Uri did a lot of that, too, as well. Are you saying that is just magic, being a magician, as opposed to ESP?
It could be.
Okay.
We can pretty much duplicate, except the controlled conditions. When you start placing laboratory controls, and many of the controls we actually use in the field in some instances, you start placing those controls on the performer, on the individual, they could not do it.
Are you saying James Randi is right?
James Randi's not right about a lot of things. Yeah, but I will tell you that, you can duplicate. Just because you can duplicate something doesn't mean it's not real. I mean, Hollywood and the theater have made, it's their reason for being to duplicate things that are not real, or things that are real, to duplicate them in other ways. Whether it's, and I'm not even talking about CGI here, in the theater they can make things happen using all sorts of effects that do happen in real life. I mean, just simply, they make it look like somebody got shot and there's a burst of blood out of their body.
Who's the best, since we're talking about James Randi and some of the stuff, when it comes to PK and moving objects on a table in front of you as a demonstration, who's the best at that?
I don't know that there's any consistent performer that I know of right now.
Have you seen an example of it that has convinced you as being real?
Oh, yeah. And not necessarily something on the table, but Martin Caden, who was my buddy whose cigar smoke I smelled after he died.
Right.
Marty was also, among other things, he was a science and science fiction writer. He was a consultant at NASA. He was an aviation expert and a pilot, and he was the guy who created the $6 Million Man TV show. It was based on his book Cyborg. And Marty was able to move objects and actually teach other people to do it. He's a big part of my Mind Over Matter book, in fact. He passed away in 1997, but he absolutely did things under well-controlled conditions.
Did he teach you how to do it?
Yeah, and I can do it every once in a while. It's not a consistent thing.
Okay, well, you got to tell me. You can't just say that and not say anything. What's the environment that you have to be in, and what have you moved, Loyd?
Well, before him, I'd had some occasional things move or some unusual effects in electronics that have happened under certain circumstances that I was pretty well convinced that I was doing unconsciously. We used to have at JFK University, where I'm on faculty, back when we had a parapsychology program in the 80s, we did do spoon bending parties. And I was able to, after the induction, which is a little bit of a light altered state induction, I was able to do things like tie hacksaw blades into knots, which was a fun thing, especially since they were brittle metal and they would have, if you try to bend them, they break, they snap. But that was one of the fun things that apparently I was doing. I wasn't aware that I was doing until after the fact. So I was able to do those sorts of things. And what Marty did, which in some respects, unless you do it under fairly controlled conditions, it has other explanations, and that is you basically make a little paper pyramid and you balance it on a pin or on a spindle, and whether you put your hands around it or not, the idea is to get the thing to turn.
Right.
Preferably under glass. And part of the process, frankly, is to sit there and stare at it, but not wish it or will it to move, and see if it does move with your hands on either side, with yourself breathing on it. That's called the control period. And then the moment you start thinking about it to move, if that's when it starts moving, and that's what's happening, you can kind of connect the dots a little bit.
Tell me about this hacksaw blade. How does it turn out to be tied in a knot? Is it in front of you?
Literally, what I did, apparently, and other people were doing it too, who were doing the metal bending. We literally, it almost feels like it goes to something soft, and you just tie it in a knot like a string.
With your hands?
Yeah, with your hands.
Oh, well, that would be impossible.
Right. That's right.
I'm not going to get you off this lightly. How long does it take?
If you have the right person doing the induction, which is really kind of, we just did a little spoon bending thing at the Rhine Research Center a couple weeks ago for the Forever Family Foundation's annual meeting, and doing the spoon bending induction, there's a gentleman by the name of Jack Houck, Houck, and I think it's just jackhouck.com. I think his site is still up. There's information on how to do the spoon bending parties, and basically it's getting you need a lot of people. You need to have fun. You need to be silly. This is something that kind of need to get past this inhibition and that boggle threshold. So you need to be a little silly. Mm-hmm. And you basically, talk to people about imagining the light or some energy coming into their bodies and going down into the spoon, and you start yelling at the spoons to bend. So you need a whole bunch of people who are getting silly and goofy. When we did it at the Rhine Center, John Kruth, who was the executive director, who had not really done too many of the spoon bending parties as a leader, was a little too understated, and so nothing was really happening until I started telling jokes, and we started getting people to laugh and start telling other jokes. And then a couple of the folks started bending things very quickly. So,
is the metal getting hot? The hacksaw blades, are they getting warm?
Usually not. They can get a little warm or feel a little warm, but they don't really get hot.
That is so interesting. Wow. Okay. And you could actually, but we all know, us men out there, you bend a hacksaw blade a little bit while you're using it, or otherwise they just snap.
Right.
And the thought of tying one in a knot sounds impossible. And I have a garage full of tools. I'm here to tell you, I know about hacksaw blades. I cannot see one of those getting tied. I would have loved to have witnessed that. And you think you could do it tomorrow? Get a room full of people together? You can actually pull this off.
Being in that spoon bending party a couple weeks ago has kind of encouraged me to try and do one. I haven't done one in a long time, so I've got to get a group of people together and practice leading the group and see if we can get that kind of energy going again.
That sounds like 14 million views on YouTube if you pull that off.
Yeah, but the fact is that the skeptics, there's two problems here. If it's the hacksaw blade, of course, that's great. If it's a spoon, even if it's a fairly thick spoon, people are going to assume that people's strength is what's doing it. And you can tell if you're there watching people's hands, and especially the amount of leverage, the lack of that, sometimes the bowl of the spoon being peeled over, those kinds of things, you could fake that. There are ways to prepare the spoons, and you could definitely fake an entire spoon bending party if you wanted to. You could even fake I could paint a different material to look like a hacksaw blade and fake that, and that's what is exactly what the skeptics would say was going on.
Sure. Yeah, James Randi.
Yeah.
There's a reason why he hasn't cut that check yet.
Well, there's a lot of reasons why he hasn't cut that check. The best people don't go for that money, because if you read the rules, you'd be an idiot to go for the money.
Oh, I've read the rules. That was funny. Yeah, you're absolutely right.
Years ago, I actually showed the rules to a couple of entertainment attorneys, one who's a sports attorney who represents athletes, and I asked them flat out, okay, so your clients, football player, baseball player, they're really great, statistics. Would you let them take this test if it was for an exceptional performance as a player? And, without fail, they said, no way, because they'd be signing away all their rights over to Randy. Even if they won, they'd get $1 million, but they'd have no rights to any of that, any of the activity.
You want to take some phone calls?
Sure.
I'm tweeting out right now. I'm actually trying to do the impossible, which is tweet and interview at the same time. Okay, 323-825-5045. We're opening up the phone lines. If you want to Skype in, you can Skype in Fade2Black14. We have a very smart audience here, Loyd, and it's awesome. And it's big, it's fun, and one of my favorite things to do is to take phone calls. So let's do that. 323-825-5045, Loyd Auerbach. Now, my mom, Loyd, as we're waiting, we're on a 10-second delay, so it'll get jammed up here in just a few seconds. My mom, when I was a kid, she's still alive. She's awesome. My mom used to do ghost writing, and I would watch her when I was very young. I would go to bed. I'd wake up in the morning, and she would still be at the dining room table with a stack full. I'm talking about a ream of paper in front of her that she has
She
written.
did automatic writing.
Yeah, automatic writing. What did I say? Ghost writing?
Ghost writing, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why, but I've always done that. I've always called it ghost writing growing up. Automatic writing. What do you think about that? And what are they channeling? What's happening there?
Well, automatic writing at the very base is a connection with your unconscious. It can be creative flow. There have been famous authors who have actually done automatic writing. Victor Hugo apparently is one of them who used some of his material that he wrote was automatic writing. So it's tapping into your creative flow, your higher self, if you want to call it that. It might be tapping into spirits if you have that ability, but it's something that can connect with our unconscious and typically in a creative way. And I want to point out that using a Ouija board alone, you're doing automatic writing.
I wanted to get to Ouija boards. I knew we would eventually get to that. When I asked my mom about that, I would say, okay, what did you write? She would say, I don't know. And
yeah, because it's coming from a different part of yourself, yeah.
And I would ask her, do you ever read it? And she said, no.
Oh.
Yeah. Well, it would take her forever to read it. I'm telling you, I would watch her write, and she wouldn't watch her hand. She would, be looking in the opposite direction.
Right.
And I mean, page after page after page, and she did it so fast, it would freak me out. And I was 5, 6, 7 years old watching this go down, and it was fascinating. But she never went back and read it, and she said she didn't know what she was writing. Is that usually the case when it's automatic writing?
Yeah, that actually try to avoid looking at it, try to avoid watching your hand, because that actually brings your conscious mind into the process. So it's much better if you can kind of let it go off on its own.
Now, she used to do the Ouija. I never did. I've had a couple of experiences. I back off the Ouija. The Ouija is something that freaks me out. What is going on with Ouija? We just had Tracy Twyman on. Do you know Tracy?
No, I do not.
Okay, and we had Tracy Twyman on a couple of weeks ago, and very fascinating. She's been Ouija-ing and talking to Baphomet and Cain of Cain and Abel of the Bible for the last 13 years, and she's written a couple of books. All of her communications with both Baphomet and Cain have been not only documented but put into books. Pretty fascinating. What do you think is happening with Ouija?
Well, for the most part, the Ouija is what's called the ideomotor response, which is our unconscious muscle movements, which is what happens when you use just a pendulum or dowsing rods. And if you're playing on your own, it's like automatic writing, but if there's an intention set that you also go to with Ouija, because people are so freaked out by it, because it's got this cultural phenomena around it, it's very likely that there's going to be some replies that kind of fit in with what you think you're going to get. So teenagers who go to the Ouija saying, ooh, we're going to talk to spirits, we're going to talk to demons, they're going to get that. And it's likely coming from their unconscious minds. Or if it's more than one person, it may be one of them faking out the others. So when a single person works on the Ouija board, it is the intention. And it's always been that. The Ouija board itself is pieced together from two devices. The planchette, the pointer, used to be a device for automatic writing. For the front leg, you'd actually use a pen, and you'd rest your hand on it, and you would do automatic writing that way. The board itself was a way for a guy to figure out, the guys who invented the Ouija board made a bloody fortune. They took something that people were doing in their homes on their own, which was basically putting alphabet cards in a circle with a pointer, usually a glass, and they put a board together with a planchette, which was a cool pointer, and they sold a slew of them. They made a lot of money. It had nothing to do with anything occult. People were already doing it. It is derived from spiritualist traditions, of course, because people were trying to contact spirits that way. But it's based on the same principle as automatic writing, and it's really your unconscious first and possibly other sources second. And until the Exorcist movie came out, frankly, it didn't have as bad a reputation. That movie set the tone for the future. That and the movie The Changeling with George C. Scott.
Yeah, The Changeling was great. You sound a little James Randi-ish when it comes to Ouija.
Well, for a couple reasons. Very little information that's verifiable comes through Ouija boards. Creative information seems to come through Ouija boards. And we do know a lot about the ideomotor response. So it's kind of tough to, when there's no, there have been cases people using Ouija boards to talk to spirits, and they do get information that they could not possibly have known. That makes it a form of ESP that they might have used with spirits. But generally, there's no evidence that there's any presence there at all.
Interesting. So if somebody that is has the powers of ESP or a medium to contact the other side, you're saying that couldn't be channeled through the planchette?
Sure. They could easily do it that way.
So then that would be an example.
If they wanted to, yeah.
Right. And that would be an example of the Ouija being used correctly.
Right. Well, it correctly is, it's hard to say given that it is a game from Hasbro, or Parker Brothers.
Where
do you buy a Ouija board? You buy it at a Toys R Us store.
Right, which is completely wrong because I think it is totally dangerous.
It's a game. It was developed as a game. That's what the game is. There were a lot of versions of the Ouija board sold during the 20s through the 50s. There were a lot of knockoffs, spirits talking boards. I actually own a couple that I picked up. They were kind of vintage that were there. So there were all sorts of vintage ones. The patent is online for the Ouija board. This is not, it's a piece of cardboard or press board plus a piece of plastic. That's all it is. And honestly, it's not much different than doing EVP.
When I have callers call into the show and they tell me about their past Ouija board experiences, it seems like it's a bad experience that happens when they are kids, and then they don't mess with the Ouija board as an adult.
Well, I'm sure some of my friends, unless they're from high school and junior high, unless they're listening to this right now or my other interviews, still think the Ouija boards are evil, but I was the person who made them think that.
Wait.
They wanted to do some stuff, and I basically, moved it around and made up a couple good stories. And
No, Loyd, you're not supposed to do that.
Well, I was a teenager.
Okay. But what would have to happen with the Ouija board to change your opinion?
You'd have to have somebody show up on top of, beside just having it move around.
Such as? I don't understand.
A ghost? There'd have to be somebody there.
Okay.
There'd have to be, the board would have to provide some, first of all, information that nobody who were using it could have known, and there would have to be somebody present, like a ghost present.
Interesting.
And the ghost would have to tell either a medium or someone else, not through the board, but otherwise say, I'm doing that.
Well, what's the best example of ESP? I needed to get this question out of the way. What's the best example of that?
Well, best example, it's hard to say. If you mean best evidence or the most common example that people experience is probably knowing who's on the phone when it rings, not having had any sort of cues before that, sometimes even knowing what song is going to be on the radio when you turn the radio on. So that's a good example of that of ESP. From an evidential perspective, there are two lines of research that are extremely evidential. One of them is in my new book. It's actually the ESP Wars is about the U.S.'s use of remote viewing, U.S. and Soviet Union's use of remote viewing for psychic espionage. And people can pick up information at a vast distance under extremely controlled conditions, and that's been shown again and again, both within the government research on both sides of the world, as well as in the laboratory, again and again, and even on television.
Well, I've seen remote viewing happen with me, and one of the examples is, we were part of the discovery of the alien underwater base off the coast of Malibu, which I'm sure you've read about, and we did that back in May. And and somebody sent me a link. Jimmy, you have to go check this out. I was like the sixth person to see the video of a remote viewer. His name's Edward Reardon, by the way. He's got his object. It's in the envelope, and he starts drawing. And I'm serious. I freaked out because I knew what he was drawing, but he had no idea. And this was back when the Malibu base was just starting to hit the media. It may have been before ABC News or the Huffington Post and so forth got a hold of the story. So there wasn't a way for him to know much about it. But when I was watching him draw this, it was obvious he wasn't drawing. How do I explain this? He wasn't drawing a golf cart. He wasn't drawing a pencil. He wasn't drawing he was drawing the entrance to the base that I knew about. Now, this was all after the fact. I'm watching the video. I didn't watch this in real time. But it convinced me at that point, however skeptical I was about remote viewing and Ingo Swann and everything else before that. I'm not saying I was a skeptic about Swann. I'm just saying remote viewing in general. And I'm watching it happen, and I'm convinced that there was something to remote viewing. I really do. I really think that a good remote viewer is really good and has talent.
Yeah, well, there have been significant remote viewings done, even live on TV. Joe McMoneagle, who was the U.S. Army's #1 viewer, has done phenomenal examples on television live, which you can find on YouTube. And our book, ESP Wars, actually, which was co-written by the main author is Ed May, who was the program director of Stargate, our remote viewing program from 85 to 95. So we have some great examples of remote viewing in the book.
Do you think, is the government still doing it, even though they're saying no?
Not as a program. Ed has spent some time trying to figure that out. And actually, Ed and Joe, after the program shut down in 95, spent 10 years trying to get somebody else to back the program. And it just was a political hot potato, kind of a giggle factor in Washington. And they haven't been able to find it. That doesn't mean that individuals in the government aren't consulting with remote viewing, because we see that happening with law enforcement all the time.
Well, I would think that deflecting it and laughing at it is a way to covertly run the program at the same time.
Yeah, it's more about the political careers of the people who are back in the program. So there are plenty of people who are willing to do it, but they couldn't get past the congressional oversight, who thought it was just if anybody found out they'd lose their political careers, kind of thing.
Well, I would think it's a good example of something when we're talking about paranormal or abilities. Is it real or not? Remote viewing is one of the best examples that it can happen, and it is real.
That's correct.
Yeah, I don't get it, and I would think that if I was running some CIA covert op, that's the one I would do, because it seems, what's the word I'm looking for? Legit. I think it has integrity.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. Wow. 323-825-5045. I ignored a couple of phone calls because we were knee-deep in conversation, so I apologize for that. 323-825-5045. I want to get back really quick, not only to your website, but to your classes. And is it growing? Are people still? Is it a growth industry?
Well, I'd like to say that it is. I like to say that I get more and more students. I do pick up some occasional students here and there. There are people. The Ryan Education Center, the Ryan Research Center, has started doing some online courses as well. So we're seeing some people pop up. But when you compare against the people, the thousands of people who call themselves ghost hunters and paranormal investigators who, for the most part, don't seem to have any interest in learning anything beyond what they see on TV, it's very disappointing. It's an extremely disappointing situation. And for people, as we mentioned earlier on, anybody can really learn this stuff. It's not like they have to go through a 4-year college to learn even the basics of investigation to do it right. There's a lot of literature, but there is a lot that people can learn. I teach some of the basics of parapsychology in general. Just it's research, what the research findings are about people being psychic, about past experiments and also past investigations, the history of ghost hunting, and the methods that people work with, as well as how to best help the clients and that sort of thing. And I find when I've suggested to some of the amateur ghost hunters out there that they consider either my class or even a book. Forget about my classes. Let's going to talk about maybe not even one of my books. They look at me like I know everything I need to know.
Right.
And they have no interest.
Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Who's calling?
Hello?
Hi, you're live right now. Say hi to Loyd.
Hey there, Loyd. How's it going?
Good, thanks. How are you doing?
Not too bad.
Okay, what's your name really quick?
Easy Rabbit.
Okay. What's your question for Loyd?
Well, I was wondering if you ever thought of the possibility, you've had several guests talk about ETs, archons, and whatnot, being able to manifest into other forms.
Okay.
Okay. I thought, okay. So I'm wondering, what did you think about the possibility of maybe, for some people that see ghosts, what if the ghost is just something like an ET or an archon manifesting into something that they believe? Like, if they didn't believe in ETs, along the lines that you have to believe something in order to observe it. So if someone doesn't believe in ETs, but they still wanted to contact them, what if they're manifesting into something that they do believe, like a ghost, as a means to contact them? Although I do believe there's a lot of ghost cases that are genuinely ghosts. I'm just posing what if some of the cases are something along the lines of that.
That's a great question, E.G. Thanks for the phone call.
Well, first, we wouldn't know that they were ETs.
Exactly.
They're looking like human beings. Second, for many of the cases, the human being that's identified can relate back to someone who actually was alive, had been alive. So they'd be impersonating somebody who used to be alive, and again, we wouldn't know the difference. Let's take the reverse here. Some of those channelers who are talking to extraterrestrials, how do you know that they're not dead vacuum cleaner salesmen from the 40s pretending to be an ET so that people will listen to them?
Well, do you think that is, it's like the preponderance of the evidence when we're having so many ET sightings? Let's just say grays, little grays, and that's what they want to see. Is that what is being manifested?
Well, there's an element of how much is nuts and bolts hardware and how much are potentially projections of the human psyche. And J. Allen Hynek talked about that quite a bit, actually, many years ago. Some of it was he was convinced was nuts and bolts hardware. Where that came from is a whole different question. But there was some that he thought might have been psychic projections or some other kind of projection.
And if you're saying, well, because, and I guess I'm saying it, or I'm asking because everybody seems to see the same thing. Is it something that's generated from television, from books?
It definitely could be. I remember an alien abduction so-called expert years ago talking at a conference in '92 and saying, I'm going to put up an image of the alien who is the head alien above the reptilians. And I have not been able to find, people under hypnotic regression have consistently pointed at this alien as the head alien, and I've not been able to find a single media image of this alien at all. And if it seems familiar to you, you must have been abducted, which itself is suggestion. She puts it up. It looked familiar. I would kick myself for not having recognized it immediately. I was at this conference and I was leaving right away to go to the airport. As I'm getting to the airport, I realized where I'd seen the image before. When I got home, I opened one of my books. I photocopied the image and emailed it to her, or faxed it to her, rather. Never heard back from her again. It was an image of Baylock from Star Trek, the Corbomite Maneuver episode, one of the early episodes. And in the first two seasons of Star Trek, the original series, right underneath the Desilu Productions image was Baylock.
And so what does that tell you?
Everybody in the world had probably seen that image. And what it tells me is that it puts it into people's consciousness. And especially when you're undergoing regression or just sometimes recovered memories, you're going to pull an image that is culturally significant or is in your mind without even necessarily realizing it. Now, of course, the counter would be that, obviously Baylock was based on a real alien. But, you can't prove it either way.
You can't. 323-825-5045. Want to see TweetDeck blow up? Add a column with the search. Oh, Pound Ferguson. Okay. 323-825-5045. That opens up the phone lines. Also, you can Skype in Fade to Black 14. What have you ever... I actually want to sidestep a little bit. Have you ever seen anything strange in the sky, Loyd?
I had a UFO sighting when I was a kid. When I lived outside of Washington, D.C. with some of my friends.
How old were you?
10.
And what did you see?
Saw a disc-like shape coming down out of the clouds and kind of doing a circle generally around the area and kind of pop back up into the clouds.
And a disc-like metallic?
Yeah, metallic disc-like thing, yeah.
Now, you're a guy. You're a guy. You know what an airplane looks like.
Oh, it was not an airplane. It was low enough that we all saw what it was.
So what did you think you saw?
It looked like a craft, a flying saucer.
No, what I mean is, do you think you saw something off-planet? Was it...
I wanted it to be that. I don't know what it was. I assumed it was something from off-planet, especially since it was flying in commercial airspace in and around D.C. I seriously doubt we were testing any sort of special craft in that area. And my dad worked for NBC at the time, and there had been something, a sighting by other people, so... other people saw it as well. Saying it's an alien craft, it could have been an interdimensional craft. It could have been a time traveler craft. Who knows? I don't know where it came from.
Right. And as an adult looking back, when you hear, looking back at your own experience and you hear somebody talk about it, you don't think they're crazy.
No, I never did. And I actually volunteered at the Center for UFO Studies when I was at Northwestern my freshman year. And so I worked with, volunteered. It was actually at J. Allen Hynek's house. So I got to read over a lot of reports. He had me sorting reports.
We're going to take a couple more calls, but I want to get back because you said something interdimensional, time traveler.
Those are things people toss out as being possible explanations for these craft.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to get back and visit that really quick. Hi, you're live on Fade to Black. Say hi to Loyd. Who's calling?
Hi, Loyd. Hi, Jimmy. This is Arturo, or Enigma Writer.
Hi, Arturo. How are you?
I'm doing well. I guess it's a good thing that I called right now because you were mentioning about interdimensional or ghostly. And I remember when we first talked, I mentioned you. I submitted that audio.
Yes,
that I think is.
I'm going to say really quick to Loyd. Arturo has a paranormal group that he has, and about a year ago he sent in a bunch of pretty cool EVPs into the show, and we actually posted them for a while to have everybody else listen. So what's your question to Loyd tonight, Arturo? My
question is that maybe if he'd like to take a listen to those and maybe give me his expert opinion, because I've been trying to get some experts to listen to him, but it's been hard because they always pass it by. And I just wanted to ask him if he'd like to possibly take a listen to it and give me his feedback on the EVPs.
Yeah, probably the best thing for me to do is to have you send them to me or contact me via email, and then I can get them to a buddy of mine who is an audio engineer who has been doing EVP research for well over 40 years.
Which is not great. Yeah, which is not a problem. Arturo, you know how to get a hold of me. Send me the links, and I will forward those directly to Loyd. That is easy to do, and I would be more than happy to do it. Loyd, they're very interesting. I don't know what I was listening to. I will say this, though. It didn't sound normal. Am I making sense? It didn't sound right, is what I want to say. I think they definitely.
Here's the problem, though. If Arturo is going to send them to me, I also need to know a little bit about the location where they were recorded and under the conditions. Not mainly because, the best we can do is say, okay, this is not a human. He can analyze and say this is not a normal human voice, but it's not necessarily. You can't certainly say it was a ghost. You can't say it was an alien. You can't say it was a demon because there's no comparison that we have on record for sure.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's got it fully documented too as well. Place, time. In fact, we posted all of that information back then. Arturo, any other questions for Loyd?
No, that's about it. Actually, I'll do what he says. Give him all the pertinent information I can from the investigation, and hopefully he can take it from there.
Thank you so much, Arturo. Hey, good ghost hunting out there. And hey, how's the movie coming along?
It's actually coming along pretty well. I'm almost finished writing my script, 1930s film. So it's getting there. We're getting there.
I'll talk to you, Arturo. Behave, my brother.
You got it, buddy. Talk to you soon.
I'll talk to you. Loyd, that's a very talented guy right there, by the way.
Oh, good.
Yeah, very talented. Good. He's writing and he put together a really cool short film, and he's working on something else now. But just a very talented guy, and he believes in the paranormal and getting out there and actually getting it done in a real sense. Very talented. So I'm interested in what you think of these EVPs. I think there's about a half a dozen.
Okay.
So we'll get to that. And Les, I'm sorry I missed your call. Call back. I am ready. And I am not putting calls on hold tonight in the correct fashion. So you're just going to have to call in, and I'll get you guys in. All right, 323-825-5045. Loyd, we're creeping up in the end. I do want to take a couple of more calls. What are you doing now?
Besides being on the radio with you?
Yeah. Are you speaking? Are you Are you writing?
We're kind of coming towards the end of the year right now, so I'll be teaching a couple more one-off classes. I often teach one-night classes, which people can also join by phone. So if they connect with me on my website, mindreader.com, or on Facebook, I'm happy to provide them with information. My email, actually, I'll give you my email, is profparanormal@gmail.com. Just like my @profparanormal for Twitter, and happy to give people information about the one-shot classes we're doing and then the other classes that are coming up. And I'll be planning, the other thing I'm doing is planning for and starting to work on my courses, which will be starting up in January. A couple of online classes for the Ryan Research Center, one of which is an investigations class, as well as my over-the-phone classes at the place I teach here in the Bay Area, HCH Institute. And, working on getting the word out about ESP Wars, which is available on Amazon, and trying to do some more projects along those lines as well.
Oh, what do you think about this orb phenomena? What are we actually seeing?
Mostly flash reflections of all sorts of things.
Off of
dust, reflective surfaces that are out of view of the camera, Flashes are pretty powerful, and this phenomenon, there's several problems with the orb phenomenon. Number one, we can track back to a single individual the connection between orbs and spirits.
Who's that?
Dave Oster of the International Ghost Hunter Society, who back in 1994, and promoted this quite a bit early on, said, orbs are everywhere, ghosts are everywhere, orbs are spirits. So there's this illogical leap that because they were getting a lot of orbs in haunted places, that they must be spirits. And I don't know that he alone made that connection, but it certainly was promoted quite heavily at that point on the internet through that organization and others as well in the 1990s. And the orb phenomena actually evolved around the same time that flashes got much more powerful and digital cameras came into being, which also should tell you something. You don't get orbs if you use a slave flash, in other words, a flash separate from the camera.
Right.
And you don't get orbs if you're taking pictures during the daytime.
What about film?
You do get orbs on film in some cameras, but again, it depends on the flash and the focal length. It's really about the flash more than anything else.
So what if somebody was shooting an orb, if you were looking at an orb photograph from the 70s, 60s, 50s?
Still might get that, depending on the angle and what's there. The problem we don't know is we don't know, for example, if you have a picture of a living room and there's an orb there, was there a mirror to the right or to the left of the end of the edge of the picture?
And what about...
let me just add one more thing.
Okay.
Most orb pictures, people do not have an experience to correlate it. You can get a high magnetic field reading. That doesn't mean you have a ghost. That just means you have a high magnetic field. If you get a high magnetic field when a ghost is present, in other words, when someone's having an experience of that ghost, at least you can correlate or connect the two things. If you have orb pictures, but you have no indication that people are experiencing spirits, or hauntings for that matter, there's no context.
Les, who had just called in, now he's tweeting. He's saying, and this is in all caps, Loyd, what is your definition of a fear cage?
What is my definition? I don't even have a definition of a fear cage.
Okay, what is a fear cage? I have no idea.
Not even sure what a fear cage is.
Okay, Les.
A cage in which you get afraid?
I don't know. Loyd, it looked to me like he thought you knew exactly what he'd be talking about. So, Les, can you clarify? Okay, next question. What are your thoughts on Edgar Cayce?
Oh, Edgar Cayce was a phenomenal medium back in the early 20th century. He pretty much drove himself into the ground doing so much work for other people. He kind of doing remote viewing, but he said it was through spirits, diagnosing people's illnesses, offering them natural cures, natural remedies and things like that. He documented or had documented everything he did, so they have transcripts at the library of the Association for Research and Enlightenment in Virginia Beach, which he started. In fact, if you become a member of the area, you can get access electronically to most of that stuff. It was a phenomenal, I guess connecting with people was phenomenal. He made some predictions, general predictions that have been interpreted multiple different ways. And, talking about predicting the future is a very difficult thing in general, just simply because the future is not written in stone, as you mentioned before. So you're kind of banking on probabilities more than anything else.
My mom, I was talking about her earlier. When I was a kid, we had shelves and shelves. We had the Encyclopedia Britannica, right, sitting right there, like we all did growing up. I think every family had a set of encyclopedias. But right next to that, we had about 20 times the amount of Edgar Cayce books. She had them lined up. It was incredible how much my mom read Edgar Cayce. So I did. I picked them up when I was very, very young and read them. And I have to say, why is he so singular? Why don't we have another Edgar Cayce? And which to me says, I think that he had something to say. I really do. I think Edgar Cayce was maybe phenomenon's the right word.
He was a phenomenon. There was another medium who he knew a little bit, Eileen Garrett, who was another phenomenon. She was a phenomenal medium in the 40s, 50s, 30s, 40s, and 50s. And Casey's unique in that he did so much for thousands of people without asking for any remuneration. And people sent donations, which he immediately applied to a hospital. He built a hospital in Virginia Beach. He kind of promoted certain things like, massage therapy as being a positive thing. His family started the Association for Research and Enlightenment, which actually has supported, among other things, one of his main interests was in Egyptology. So they supported all sorts of research, and they've given grants for doing research in Egypt, archaeological research. The major digs on the Sphinx were all funded by the ARE.
Right.
Zahi Hawass, who was the expert on the pyramids, he went to school because of a scholarship from the ARE. So Casey did so much for the public. He gave, and he probably gave too much of himself. That's what people said. And he continued to give. He wouldn't turn anybody away, and I think that's unique in itself. Eileen Garrett did some of the same. She did quite a bit for the public. She worked with researchers. She started the Parapsychology Foundation in the 1950s, which has helped support research in parapsychology. So you have some people who are like that. Some of the mediums who work with the Forever Family Foundation are kind of like that too. They're just not as famous, and they don't have the talent to do the medical stuff that Casey did, nor, I think, could they get away with it these days. That's the problem.
When you were a kid, just like myself, did you have anything profound that left an impression?
I didn't even have, other than knowing who was on the phone kind of experience, I didn't have any kind of psychic experience that pushed me in this direction. It just was an experience of being fascinated by the subject, being fascinated by science and folklore on both sides. And if anything probably triggered or pushed me towards reading the right books, it was Dark Shadows, the soap opera. I heard the word parapsychology. I knew about psychic powers. I went to the library looking for books on parapsychology. I found books by J.B. Ryan. They were science books. That was the profound thing for me.
For me, okay, this is what we're going to leave with. This is our last discussion of the night, and it's my favorite one. But for me, Loyd, it's deja vu. I think that deja vu, just like, I have all the time I pick up phone calls and I know who's calling. Yes, it happens all the time. Song is in your head. You jump in the car, boom, there it is. That happens to us all the time. I think it's a great example of ESP and parapsychology. I really do. It's obvious. But for me, the most profound example is deja vu. And when it comes to James Randi, I want him to explain deja vu.
Well, he probably would.
He poo-poo it. Come on, you know.
Poo-poo it. Well, one of my colleagues, Vernon Neppy, who's up in Seattle, kind of wrote the book on deja vu. He's spent a lot of time researching it. He's got 48 different possible explanations for deja vu. But a chunk of them are psychic or paranormal. Some of them are not. So you take a look at each experience and see which category it fits into, backtracking on the experience, and many of them are truly paranormal or psychic experiences. Some of them aren't.
What about you?
I've had deja vu over the years. My deja vus tend to be of one particular category, which is I walk into a situation, it feels really familiar, and all of a sudden I remember a dream I had about the very situation. And sometimes, on rare occasion, I know what's going to happen for the next 10 or 15 seconds.
Well, and what does that tell you?
That's a precognitive experience, no question.
I think, okay.
That's one kind of deja vu.
When it happens to me, when it happens to me, and it happens all the time. I mean, when I was a kid, deja vu was a daily occurrence.
Wow.
And absolutely. I thought it was normal. I really did. I thought everybody had this type of experience, but it came to the point where I expected it to happen. And in some instances, when I have a deja vu experience, when I know for sure somebody's about to say something, and it's word for word, and that experience, and it can happen to me a week ago. This isn't something that happened only when I was a child. But I think it is an example of, some type of time travel experience where it makes me feel like that is real. Or B, somebody knows out there, whether it is God or whether it is some other being that knows the future, and they're planning it in my head. I don't know what it is, but it's an example of the paranormal at its best. And you can't tell me, this is my point, you can't tell me it's not real when I have my very own experiences.
And you have them over and over again. Yeah, that's the important thing. You know, the James Randys of the world would have us say that all of human experience is useless because it's all filtered and biased, and it never really relates to reality except when it suits their purposes.
Is James trying to tell us that he's never experienced deja vu? And if deja,
he would write it off as probably having had an experience or walked into a situation that was similar, that was so very similar to one he'd been in before, so he got that sense of familiarity. That's what he'd write it off as.
Well, and I guess you have to look at it like this. When it comes to the paranormal or ESP or psychokinesis, all of this is tied together. So it's all or nothing. Okay? It's all or nothing.
Yeah, right.
And so if somebody experiences deja vu, then that's it. You're on the all side. You can't have it both ways, and there can't be a gray area in the middle. I'm sorry.
You can rationalize it for your own purposes. People have been known to see objects move and say, I didn't really see that. People have been known, in fact, there have been perceptual studies that show that people will not actually see, perceive with their eye. They see them with their eyes, so they won't perceive them with their mind's eye, which is all perception really is. Data on a piece of paper that supports something different than what they believe in their scientific world. People will actually see a blank piece of paper instead of seeing actual data that contradicts what they think is going on.
Well, like I said, you can't have it. You can't have it both ways, and I'm sure that any skeptic, especially a guy like James Randi, has had his own experiences, but he's in denial on it because he's so deep into being a skeptic that he can't admit to it.
Correct.
And,
that's correct.
Yeah, and I know. Now, just because I've had deja vu doesn't mean necessarily that I believe in Bigfoot. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is the mind is a powerful thing, and it is very strong. And with my own, with my experiences in deja vu, that just tells me that there is something going on there.
Yeah,
and that's my point. I had one little ghost experience. One. I've only had one. Well, maybe two, but so let's call it 1.5. But I know what happened to me, and I'll give you the 15-second version of it. I pulled up to a friend's house, 3 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. I'm supposed to meet some people there. I go up, knock on the door. Nobody's answering. So I'm waiting for my friends to get home. I go back, and I knocked on the door a couple of times just to make sure. Okay, small house. I go back to my car. I'm waiting in my car. After about a half an hour, I'm waiting for my friends to show up. I see in the front window a face, pull the curtains back, and look out the window and look at my car. Very clearly a face, eyes, everything, curtains moved. Now, this is in the moonlight. This is to my left, 10 yards away, 30 feet. Okay, we're not talking a great distance. I saw this happen. So I thought, somebody is there, must have woke up, So I go back and knock on the door. Nothing. And I'm pounding on the door because I don't think it's funny, right? That I'm being ignored, being forced to wait in my car in the driveway. I give up. I go back. My friends show up a few minutes later. I tell them, your roommate is home. And she won't open up the door. No, she's not. What do you mean? She's pulling up behind us right now. And sure enough, the roommate shows up. Now I freak them out, okay? Because somebody's home. Somebody's in their house. So me and the two guys, there's two girls, two guys, me and the other guy, we go in the house, we open up the door, we pop on all the lights, and we clear the house. There's nobody there. Now, I know what I saw. You know what I mean? Nobody's going to convince me otherwise about what I saw because I know what I saw.
Right.
Now, are you saying now that possibly I generated this and I created this, or do you think it was an actual ghost that moved the curtains and looked out the window?
You know, for any individual experience, we have to look at the patterns that are there. It's hard to know. I would hazard a guess that it was somebody, but then again, it's impossible. It is truly impossible to know what people are actually perceiving without corroboration of some kind. When you have a single witness testimony, you accept it because it fits in with what we know, or you say it could be this or it could be that. So I'll go with your experience, which is that it is what you think it was.
Could a ghost move curtains?
Yeah, some apparitions seem to be able to affect physical objects. It's pretty rare, but like I mentioned, the ghosts of the Moss Beach Distillery and the ghosts of the Banta Inn, they've been able to do that. Even a couple of the ghosts on the Hornet have been able to move objects.
Yeah, and again, I'm not crazy. And if I'm telling you this experience, what I don't want to hear is, well, I know what I saw. And for people to say that there aren't ghosts, well, you know what? I don't know what it was, but I saw what I saw.
Right. And I think that's the important thing right there. We have a couple witnesses from the Hornet who were on the fence as to whether they actually are ghosts or not, but here's what they saw, and they saw them with other witnesses, and they have no other explanation for it at all. So the word ghost applies best, even they would admit that, until some other explanation comes along. And this ultimately is the problem we face in parapsychology. We're so underfunded because there's such an academic bias against us. Everybody calls it is that giggle factor, it is that silly factor. People don't want to research this stuff who are in mainstream science, and they will prevent us from getting funding sometimes. And even I know colleagues have lost their jobs because they've expressed interest in the subject within their fields. So it becomes this idiotic, anti-scientific attitude that scientists express because their personal belief is this ain't possible.
That's right. That's exactly right. And I'm going to let you go with this question. What do we do about it? What do the mainstream scientists do about it? And we'll end on this note. What can we do?
Well, I think what we need to do is somehow motivate the general public to even support in small amounts research in the field so that we can get more people into the field. We need more people coming into the field. We don't have a lot of youngsters coming in. There aren't really educational opportunities on an academic level in the United States because of this prejudice. There are in the UK, as it happens. But people need to get involved in supporting and speaking out about this question. They don't have to speak out and say, I believe in ghosts, but they should speak out and say, people have these experiences. Why aren't you guys, meaning mainstream science, supporting researching what's actually going on instead of just assuming something stupid? Because sometimes they come up with really stupid explanations. We also need one or two, we need the benefactors. We need the Bill Gates and the Richard Bransons of the world who are mavericks, and Elon Musk, who are mavericks here to say, let's stand up for some maverick science for a change. It doesn't take much money.
We were really close with UCLA. It was happening.
UCLA denies that lab was even there now.
Exactly. We were so close. Yeah, I guess Barry Taff was a manifestation as well. Yeah.
Right.
Loyd, I got to thank you so much for coming on. I had a great time tonight. And looking forward to having you back on again. And we'll do it before next Halloween, I promise.
Sounds great.
Loyd Auerbach, everybody. What's your website, really quick, even though the links are on our website?
It's mindreader.com, and the new book is ESP Wars.
All the best, Loyd.
Thanks.
Be safe out there.
You too. Bye.
Bye-bye. Loyd Auerbach, everybody. Thank you so much, Loyd. What a great time I just had with you. I'm going to take a quick break. This is Fade to Black on the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm going to get to your emails in a second. I'm watching everything with Ferguson. It is freaking me out. And I will take some more of your calls. We got enough time. Looking at the clock, we'll take 2 or 3. I'll be back right after this. Stay with us.
Hi everybody, this is Rob Halford, the Metal Guard on JimmyChurchRadio.com.
What's up? My name's Brian Taylor, Ninja Badass Extraordinaire, and this is JimmyChurchRadio.com. JJCR, in your face.
JimmyChurchRadio.com on the Dark Matter Radio Network.
Fade to Black. What is going on? Fade to Black, bespoke radio for the masses. I am your host, Jimmy Church. 323-825-5045. What I want to do right now, it is going down. Tell me what's going on in your town with Ferguson right now in these protests. I'm looking at these photographs from around the country. Union Square, New York City, Times Square. What is going on in your city right now? We've got a couple of minutes. I do want to talk about this. I have been engaged right now with an interview tonight, and I've been reading, but I'm also trying to do a show at the same time. What's going on, Dino?
Well, the only reason I called in is because I've seen rioting. I've seen a lot of horrible stuff in my life, and I know it gets people down. I'm a peace-loving guy. I think most of we Fade or Nots are. We don't look for trouble. But we stand up against it, and all I can say is I wasn't there, but it's the system, it's the system and how it works, how you train your peace officers. Heck, it's even the personality profile of the type of people that become cops and soldiers. It ain't me. I've been told I'd make a good cop when I had a psychological profile once because I'm opinionated and I'm hard to fool. That's what I'm told anyway.
Yeah.
So all I can.
Really quick. No, I don't stay with me, Dino. I just want to announce on Twitter right now, just everybody, we've got thousands of people that are tweeting and listening to this show right now. I just want to know, are you safe? What city are you in? And is it all cool? Bear just tweeted, it's calm and quiet here. Bob just tweeted the peace sign. Where are you listening from, and is everything cool where you are at right now? And I'm looking, right now, I know you're up north, Dino. I'm looking at this picture of Seattle right now. It looks like protest in downtown Seattle on Capitol Hill. I'm looking at another shot of Oakland, California right now, which is up near you. This is kind of tripping me out a little bit. And I said at the beginning of the show, and I mean this, I was hoping, if you remember at the beginning of the show, it looks like cooler heads prevailed. And it's not now. Hey, come on, everybody. Really, seriously, let's.
No, but we've seen this before, Jimmy. This is the thing. There are always a fringe group. I mean, heck, some of us are considered fringe group, but there's a fringe group that won't follow. They won't they won't color between the lines. In a comic book, some people, when you were a kid, you had to go outside the line. I was one of the people that kept it in the lines.
Right.
But I use my intellect to control my lizard brain. But we have a lot of young people. When I was younger, I was a little bit more rambunctious, and I did a few things. I'm just not a violent person, but other people who feel not empowered or who are ignorant that there are other ways to do things, they act out. And then they're just the sociopaths that just want to rob a liquor store or an O'Reilly's, to get auto parts,
Right.
It's wrong. It's wrong. It's wrong. I think for the purposes of our show here, your show, I worry about all the tech now that we had back in the 60s. They'd run at you and try to hit you with a bully club and throw some tear gas. Now they've got all these weapons, and you talk about what will happen if we've talked on this show if there's a fake alien invasion. It's just a way for, if there is a shadow government, it's a way to control people, and these are great rehearsals for people that are military slaves that, and police slaves that are going to say, oh, yeah, we got to protect the people. So that's what we got to worry about. Like someone said earlier tonight, there are probably drones flying around. I bet there are. And they're using all the technology and the sound weapons and the microwaves. And that's what worries me, is that we're paying for this and it's being used against us, although the criminals got to stop the looting. That's never a right reason for that.
Well, what's kind of strange? I'm looking at some of these pictures on, CNN and Fox and MSNBC on the net. And I'm looking here as far as Twitter goes. And let's see here. San Francisco's quiet. Oregon coast is quiet. Let's see here. What else do we have? I just read a couple. It looks like, well, they're saying New York City's quiet. New York is cool, brother. Let's see. I've actually read that a couple of different times. Boston, that's just popped up as being quiet. So we're having, let's see, Northeast Pennsylvania is quiet. So we're having a contradiction. We have the mass media, posting these pictures like it's out of control out there, but maybe reality is the opposite, and so it's kind of feeding into what you're saying.
Yeah, well, media does fan the flames. I mean, Marshall McLuhan said the media is the message. And so you have to be aware of manipulation, just like we're aware of it in the extraterrestrial UFO movement. And you have to also be aware that the political climate of the United States was always in the last few decades was in the cities, the big cities, New York, San Francisco, L.A. Anytime there was any kind of a verdict someone didn't like, you remember Rodney King. I thought the world was falling apart then. You remember Martin Luther King, if you're old enough, and they were tearing apart. But then who were they? They were, again, people were upset, but it is a small group of agitators, even though the feeling and the injustice may be felt. That's not the way to do it. I had an uncle who was a business agent on the waterfront for years. He worked with Harry Bridges and all these guys in the union movement. And he said that they used to love, at least in the 60s, when everybody went out on the street, it would just make them laugh because it just fed into the media image of, oh, look, they're a bunch of radicals and we got to control them and throw them in jail.
Well, yes. Look, with when it came to Rodney King, okay, I see North Carolina is quiet. Jimmy San Jose is quiet. I'm watching these, and everybody just tweet back to me. I just want to know that everybody's safe, and I just want to know where are you right now, and is it cool? Is it all good in the hood? If you know what I'm saying. But
stay off the street right now because logic does not prevail tonight.
Yeah, well, what was strange for me back with Rodney King is that the two things come to mind. One, when the video first surfaced, when it first happened, and everything was up on the news here, we were all pretty shocked by it. I think there was no internet; it was a bit different, but we were all shocked. But then that trial happened a long time later. And it seemed like that whole thing in Simi Valley and how it happened and when it happened, okay, I'm looking here, Mark Davidge. He says Gilbert and Phoenix are cool. So there you go. Keep it coming. I want to see from everybody where you're at. Well, anyway, but then when Simi Valley happened and those riots, it seemed to happen very quickly and it happened out of nowhere. And I think that the mood in L.A. was simmering for a long time. Okay, Toledo, Ohio is cool. 45 miles south of Toledo is cool. It happened? It was. I don't know if it was Rodney King or it could have been anything at that moment to kick things off because the LAPD had a bad reputation, and things were just bound to happen. You know what I mean?
But again, it's the same process. That's where I'm trying to put the thread. When Charlie Manson and his group decided to go nuts and murder people, then everybody hated hippies. I remember, it's like people were just getting used to kids with long hair, and then the Manson thing happened, and then the hate started again. And it's the same thing. Make it black against white. Hey, I have a black neighbor. I work with black people. They're not all like that, but yet it's put down to that lowest common denominator that the media goes to. If it bleeds, it leads. I want to hear real stories. That's why I listen to Fade to Black. Half the news is BS. I haven't even heard much news about our movement with Stephen Bassett to get Congress to hold hearings. They'll find any excuse to talk about BS and minuscule issues instead of the real core issues.
Yeah. It seems like it's kind of cyclical. It's kind of cyclical. Things, build up until they explode. And it takes a certain amount of time to pass before, It's inevitable, is what I'm saying. You know, it's something that's just built up. It's kind of like a volcano. You know, it's kind of like Yellowstone, or an earthquake. You know, it just builds up.
When you shatter things, things come out of it. But I just don't like how those who may be in a shadow government or those who are just so uber conservative because they have what they want or they don't have what they want, that they see anybody as different. This is another excuse to press them down, to pass repressive laws, to use force, to fund more military equipment for our police people, as if somehow someone's going to come and take my house over, you know?
There's no question, Dino. Dino, there is no question about that. None whatsoever. None. It's a shame that it's going down like this, but ultimately, you know what? It's kind of like, you know, that Pandora's box. You don't want to open it. You know, you're afraid of what's inside. And in this case, you know, it's the movie 1984 and, you know, Control and Big Brother and the masses and opium for the masses at that. And we're seeing it unfold right in front of us once again. So with that, Dino, I'm going to say good night, my brother. We'll see you tomorrow night.
Okay, peace to everybody out there, and keep your wits about you. Remember, fear is a mind killer.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dino.
Good night. Thank you, Dino.
Thank you, Dino. Thank you, Dino. We'll see you tomorrow night. Thank you to Loyd Auerbach. Stay tuned. Coming up next is The Unexplained. Special thanks to Keith Rowland and Art Bell. Fade to Black's producer is Rita Kamarian. Show's produced by Hilton J. Palm and Mark D. Kovar. Thanks to LJ3, Renee, and Jonas. Announcers are Steve Harder, Gene Vito, and Mark D. Kovar. Fady by Dale. Graphics by Method. Music is by Doug Aldrich. Intro by Spaceboy. Oh, we're going to get Doug on the show this week. He's got a new super group. Fade to Black is produced by KJCR for the Dark Matter Radio Network. I'm your host, Jimmy Church. Tomorrow night, Stephen Mailer, Brian Forrester. Everybody, and I mean this, be safe. See ya.